break
All
I'm
right,
having
here
to.
we go.
Oh, there we go.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov. Slava Ukraini. You see my shirt over here? Slava Ukraini.
Oh,
and welcome, everybody. It is a great pleasure to have Rose of Dawn
Al
and Nina
Putler, Al
Paley.
Putler. No.
Oh, Lord Gio. What a, like I
Listen,
said
fair and
before, he has to
balanced.
turn
Fair balance.
he has to turn the Z into an L already with the way things are going.
I
Shoigu's
should have
nowhere
an
to be
Abbey with this
found.
Z. Someone should edit my
Everybody's
ad with
anyway.
Z.
We're not going to get into that right now. What we are going to get into is more of the question of the culture wars that are going on around us, and a very good quote by Count Dankula that Rose of Dawn was tweeting earlier. I just want to read out for everybody because I think it's kind of a good way to cement things. I feel like a lot of culture war bullshit could be solved if people started understanding there is a huge difference between let me live my life the way I want and let me live my life the way I want, but criticize me and I'll ruin your life and probably have you arrested. So I think this is one of the things that really cements the conversation that we're going to be having today. Nina Paley, an amazing animator, genius animator, and a TERF who is now, and you'll talk a little bit about this as well, being kicked out of the TERF club. So I want to find out what's going on there.
No, it's for founding the Terf Tranny Alliance.
Well, we are going to get into that as well. So, Rose of Dawn, you are trans yourself, but you also have a slightly different point of view on certain things than you would say the community has. So, I would definitely love to get into this as far as how you found yourself in the position that you are right now, and origin story time. So, Rose of Dawn, take it away, and everybody, don't forget to subscribe, sneed those super chats, add the likes, and all that good stuff. So,
and
Rose
please,
goes first.
God,
Yeah.
please try. I know you people. I know what you're thinking. Please, God, try to at least be somewhat respectful in the chat. Please.
Those who are not respectful don't respect themselves. That's what I say.
Oh.
So origin story wise, I first transitioned around 2010 to 2011 time. I'd had quite a few difficulties going through the British process of getting medically diagnosed, because at the time a lot of people didn't really have much of an idea of what it is to be like a transsexual or how any of that stuff works, how referrals work or anything like that. And I was generally alone for a lot of that time. I didn't have a lot of connections with any other trans people except for the occasional really, really cringy website, which would always have names like Susan's Playground, Laura's Playground, and they are these, like, they would use like little avatars of like little girls in very frilly outfits, and like this was the only type of resource that trans people had at that time. I know because I was looking for something that was relatively normal, but it didn't exist. So that kind of stuff creeped me out. So I generally didn't have a lot to do with other trans people until around 2012 when I moved to London. And I started to become a little bit more involved with London's queer scene, where I started to meet other trans women and trans men, and started off with like the occasional non-binary person. And I just started to learn about all of this kind of stuff, and I didn't think much of it. But then as my time in the queer space kind of went on, I started to notice there was more and more of a drift to a hard left position, and more kind of extreme voices were the ones that were controlling the conversation, especially when it came to trans issues. And there, like, people who would be recognizably trans to me started to become much like smaller in number compared to people who were talking, who would say like, I'm trans, but all they would do is just change their pronoun and that's it. And it almost kind of came across as a bit of a contagion, because you just have one or two people identifying as non-binary, and these could actually be people who would do something to make themselves appear more androgynous. But then it just increasingly became like you'd have like men and women who would not do a thing and just became non-binary, and then became trans men, and then started to just give themselves more and more random genders and random pronouns. And I noticed more things sneaking in, like asking everyone's pronouns because you should never assume what anyone's gender is, and that's something which I found quite upsetting because I spent a lot of time, effort, and money on my transition to the point, like I'm recognizably a woman in that kind of sense. I know people might kind of re-it the language there, but I'm trying to say it in as best a way as I possibly can that people can understand. I want the world to see me as a woman. There's the reason why I transitioned.
Well, before Nina Paley, I think a question that's often asked is, how do you define what a woman is? Like, what exactly is the qualities that would define a woman? So for you, Rose, what would that be?
So that would be an adult human female, which I naturally do not meet. But the way that I see it is that almost doesn't really matter in what my aim is as a trans woman, right? So what I want, and the way that I come across, like way I want to come across is, I want to be treated in society as though I am a woman, right? I feel most comfortable when I am presenting in this kind of way, and this is how I feel I am. Now, I am not someone who wants to take up spaces in, like, for example, a woman's place on like a women's sports team, or a women's short list as a politician, or women's writing lists, or anything like that. That's not the kind of thing which I want to do.
Or women's sports, for that matter.
Yeah, well, yeah, like that kind of thing. And so I'm very much aware that my history as a biological male, it gives me different experiences, and that I don't want to make people feel awkward by me barging into places and being, I am a woman, hear me roar, when I don't have the same kind of experience. And I've got to be very conscious that there is a big difference between a trans woman and a cis woman, as it were. Lots of big differences, but so many of these really shouldn't matter. I think the important thing is, if you're presenting and making an effort to, transition into a specific gender, then I would like for that to be respected. I don't think that believing in it should be mandated by law, or that it should become some sort of religious doctrine. Kind of going back onto my, how I was talking about how I started my channel, one of the things that I noticed was these ideas of various genders became more and more and more bizarre, and nobody was fighting back against it. In fact, people could identify as the moon, and the response would be, well, that's that's how moon self-identifies. And I had people legitimately, in fact, moon gender was the reason why I started my channel in the first place, because someone defended being the fucking moon. And so I was like, I can't deal with this shit anymore, talking about it just with my friend in the kitchen. It's like, I've got to put my thoughts out there. And so like that's kind of how things started with me. And yeah, it's the way in which the trans movement is at the moment is weird. I think it's very counterproductive. I think it's very adversarial. And I don't think a lot of these people understand or appreciate how they come across to the wider world, and not just their little bubble online. I don't think they understand it. And
well, that's something that I would also say for all online bubbles, including all the degenerates that write bad things against
please,
people
do not
who they
alienate
disagree
our
with.
audience.
I don't care, because the point
of
is that
you do.
people no, I don't. The point is that people have to get out of those bubbles and be respectful to other people that don't really mean them or their kids or anybody in society any harm by choosing to, adopt a certain mode of being. As far as the reasons as to why, these are interesting things to get into later on. But I want to switch it up right now to Nina. Nina, for those who don't know, once again, wonderful animator. You are currently working on your Book of Revelation series, and I chose the Lamb of God with the blood coming out for the thumbnail, which I named Transubstantiation, which I really love the pun that I managed to create there. But it is also talking in a way about change, too, because, Gio, what is transubstantiation? Before I get to Nina.
It's from I forget butchering the definition.
It is the exchange. Is the changing of blood?
Change of the property. It's the hypostation of like one property to another.
Yeah,
but
specifically in Christianity, it would be the changing of Christ's
body
blood
and
into the
yes,
wine that people drink.
The flesh of Christ and the blood of Christ into
yes.
bread and wine, yes.
So there is a theme of change going on here. That's what I want to kind of accentuate here. But anyway, Nina, going back to you, please tell us how you find yourself in the position that you currently are, and specifically regarding this current scuff with the TERFs that I thought were your family, your kin now, and something ain't right. There's something ain't right in Denmark. What's going on?
Yeah. So my historical perception of all this. So back in the day in San Francisco, I was in like the queer scene, the sex positive scene. I had plenty of trans friends. I had a couple trans lovers. I was never transphobic. I was, having sex with autogynephilic trans identified men before the people that started accusing me of transphobia were born, pretty much.
You even got into it with Camille Paglia.
No, not really. Anyway, so it was all good. It was like feminists and trans identification or transsexuality. It was transsexuality back then. Transsexuality back then was a small enough thing, a minority thing, that it didn't actually cause many practical problems for women. There was always a faction of women that found it deeply insulting. They call it woman face. I'm sympathetic to that. I was never insulted by drag, but I understand.
Do you think that the drag, the drag?
Let me just finish, because I know you're going to derail me. I'm having enough trouble as it is.
No, but you were in San Francisco in the 80s, right? Like when it
in the
was...
90s. I was in San Francisco in the 90s. And we also knew
they
the
cleared
difference.
the bodies off the streets at the time then.
We knew the
that's
difference.
A terrible joke.
We knew the difference between drag and transsexualism. They are not remotely the same thing, and everybody got along and all that. And then in the like Rose says, the early 20-teens, things started to change. What I know now is that what was, the trans, it wasn't the same kind of trans movement, but this there was this big push of, I would say, heterosexual men identifying as trans women that took over this movement. Also, when gay marriage was legalized in the United States, these organizations, LGB, and then the T was added, organizations, they had achieved their main goal of acceptance, and they would have all had to disband without a new project. So suddenly there was this huge infusion of money for the T, and there were all these allies happy to sort of push this thing. And I think what we call transsexuals, which was sort of the old, when I think of transsexuals, I'm usually referring to like the more old school people that got surgery and whose goal was to quietly, pass as female if they were male, or male if they were female, and just live their lives. They got marginalized in the movement that was supposedly for them. Rose can correct me if I'm off base here. And then it just sort of became a free-for-all incursion on women's rights and women's spaces. And really, it became this mainstream popular thing. Like, it became an excuse for misogynists to violate women's boundaries. And that's why we have Lia Thomas today, and all these men who eject their brothers from masculinity, right? Men who cannot tolerate feminine men, so they bully them and push them out of manhood in spite of their maleness. Then you have these same men, championing trans women and telling women that they should be nice. And it's all very misogynistic. And now women are getting really, really pissed, as we could predict. So I got called a transphobe starting in 2017 because I started pushing back on this a little bit. I said that women don't have penises, you know, really, really aggressive and hateful things like that. And, you know, so I got called a TERF, and it's like, well, okay, you know, whatever. I guess I'm a TERF now. I've been branded with it. But what's happening now is the so-called gender critical movement has gotten big enough and made enough progress. And people, I guess, have become radicalized from the radicalism that started a few years earlier on the trans activist side. So now the TERF side no longer, we're there, I don't know, ceding the moral high ground that we had. We had moral high ground, and we're just flushing that down the toilet because there's like an extreme faction that is becoming as loud, obnoxious, and irrational as the extreme faction of the trans activists that transsexuals, you know, were like, oh, we really need to distance ourselves from these whack jobs, but how do you do it? And yeah, we're in the same position now. And so many people are going to hate me for saying this, right? But it's true. It's like, I enjoyed having the moral high ground, at least to myself, at least in my own
just a bit sharing it with the people, and now you're on your own.
We could turn them into lebased trad wives. That's no.
But what is exactly happening with the TERFs who are going extreme right now? Like, Rose, you may have noticed this too.
They're going to the political right, obviously.
Yeah, Rose. Actually, I'd like you to like. Are you observing this as well?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's one of the things which I found very interesting is not even just in this kind of trans and GC kind of argument where one side seems to be radicalizing the moderates on the other. You're seeing this through a lot of different identity politic related movements. It's something which is becoming increasingly common, regardless of whether it's like identity based on race or sex or sexuality or gender. Since 2016, everyone's been getting a lot more radicalized because we're having everything constantly shoved down our throats and being told how immoral and nasty and bad the other side is. But don't worry, we're good, and everything that we do is morally justified. Like you saw it the other day from the GC side when there was that trans woman who attended the LGBT Alliance conference in London, and there's a video which was put online by someone who was attending and who actually was berating her basically for being a trans woman, like, and also because she had used female restrooms, which is something which she is allowed to do regardless of what they think. Like, she is allowed to do that. And after that video came out, there was a lot of kind of running to justify it on the gender critical side, and there was a lot of people who started saying that, well, no, actually, no, she was recording women in the bathroom, and that's you know, that's absolutely disgusting. Like, she's a pervert, and like there isn't any evidence to suggest that she was doing that. She said she wrote a blog about her time there, and she mentions wearing a wire to record things, but that doesn't mean that she was recording every waking second or recording women in the bathroom or anything like that.
Well, there's a comment. I don't know if this is true or not. There was a comment from Swami Natero who says, and by the way, send the comments to Super Chats. That always helps out the show. But anyway, says the TIM posted on their blog that they were going to film women in the bathroom.
No, they don't say that. They don't say. I've read the blog. They don't say that.
Wait, what is this referring to? This incident?
They don't say that.
TIM stands for trans-identified male, which is a synonym for trans woman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
that's not. I've read the blog. No, what happens is she mentions in the blog that she's going to record. She has a microphone on her lapel or on her bra or something like that. The idea being to record the various speeches that are going on and various confrontations that she might have. But there isn't anything to saying, oh, I'm going to go and record women in the bathroom. Like, that's Like, and
that
just
should,
to
that
also
should be
be
pretty easy
clear,
to see, right? Like, if there's
Yeah.
a website, they should have it written in quotes or being said, I am going to the women's bathroom to do yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's-
if that's not being said, then
yeah,
why are they...
that's not. She has not said that that's what she was doing, recording women in the bathroom. It's very disingenuous to claim that. And as a bit of a side note, even if that was the case, that wasn't the motivation for when the man actually yelled at her, because this has only kind of come out afterwards as a way of defending what had happened. You know, like
What was the intent though? To record speeches? Or?
Yeah, so like she probably, like, you know, I've had interactions with TRAs in real life, and they can like try and get under your skin. Like it's happened to me like once or twice. And
Wait, what is TRA?
nasty. Trans rights activist.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So they like, it wouldn't surprise me if she did want to rile some people up, or maybe not. Like, I can't assume what her motivation was going to be, but in this particular incident, she didn't do anything to instigate it. So that's why I find it kind of weird that there's this rush to instantly smear her, that she must therefore have, you know, like everything which we did is completely justified. And then when people then point out all the bad things which TRAs have done, and there's a hell of a lot, you know, you're talking about assaults, we're talking about death threats, rape threats, rats being nailed onto doors. Like there's been so much nasty stuff on the TRA side. And people are very quick to call that out, and as they should be. This stuff, and I've done this a hell of a lot on my channel. I put it front and center and say, like, this is unforgivable stuff. But when you see the other side doing something like, I'm not going to say it was a hate crime or anything, but it's bloody nasty. It's really, really nasty.
And
so you're saying that TERFs are now, what is the thing they're going?
We should distinguish between TERFs and gender critical. So the person that did this was actually a man.
Yeah,
the person that did the insulting, and he lost his shit, really.
Because like they're TERFs that are like just passive. Like my good friend Nina Power, who recently came back to Twitter. But then there's like, you know, our good friend Mary Harrington, who I would say is more gender critical and more along the political right. But are you saying that like the TERFs are going along?
Well, the RF in TERF stands for radical feminists, and even though it's bandied about a lot, really it's at its heart a misogynistic slur directed at women. But gender critical can include anybody.
But to be clear, just for the people who are tuning in who don't really know what exactly this place was, this conference, what exactly was this conference that was taking place, and the person who got assaulted, what role were they playing within that whole conference?
It was the LGB Alliance conference, and the person that got assaulted was not a member of, was a critic of the LGB Alliance. The LGB Alliance, yeah, sorry.
I mean, she wasn't assaulted. She was, well, insulted.
Insulted, yes.
Very nastily. Yes. Yeah, it was more like a verbal, I don't know, like, I don't always like using the word assault when it comes to words, but it's really, it's not very pleasant. Verbal abuse.
Yes.
Verbally, she was verbally abused. There we go.
Yeah.
Verbally abused. She was verbally abused, and
I think...
it's nasty. It's incredibly.
But
nasty.
the person in question, whose name I think is Jen, was not a member of the LGB Alliance.
No,
there's a lot of trans activists that hate the LGB Alliance because, as its name would suggest, there's no T in there. So some lesbians and gays and bisexuals did not want to go on this trans activist
Well, it
path.
seems the left,
and so they formed their own, you know, they had to form their own thing. And so trans activists say that by merely existing as an organization, that it's inherently hateful and transphobic.
Real quick, I know that Gio, you have a point, but before that, my question about what was happening with Jen, there were people in the chat right now who were saying that even going in somewhere and recording people without their consent, that there is something not quite right about that.
Not...
So as far as just like if we, and I agree with Rose definitely and Nina that there is no reason at all to ever be insulting to a person, to verbally abuse them in any, you know, in any reason. But if we are talking about people being fair, like I agree that people on the right should be fair and respectful to people who are fair and respectful towards them, regardless of any ideological differences. I think just in the same way, if there is something wrong in terms of laws, in terms of just politeness of recording people without their consent, I'm curious, where do you fall on that? I know it's kind of a side road, but just because people were bringing that up, I think it is important to keep that in mind too.
I think that if this was someone going into like a LGBTQIA+++ conference and they had a microphone and they were recording what was going on in there, none of these people would be raising an issue with it. In fact, the TRAs would raise an issue with it. They would bring up the same arguments and say, this is a breach of our privacy. Like you need to have respect and stuff. This is one of the problems with the tribalism that we have in this debate, and how a lot of these people just kind of deal with two tiers of morality. It was fine for them, but their enemies can't do it. There have been plenty of people who have recorded things that have gone on in LGBTQIA+++ circles or whatever, and a lot of that stuff is important to kind of get out there. Like, if I'm being completely honest, if I was in a position where I could go undercover in one of these things and do it for a video or whatever, I would totally do that. So I wouldn't condemn her for doing that, but unless she's like unless like she was doing something very specifically dodgy. But like that doesn't sound like that's what was happening at all.
Because I'm on the gender critical side, I just want to say that no matter, like, the people that are defending this, the people that are defending the verbal abuse, they're justifying it by saying like, well, we were pushed, we're so angry, which is exactly what the extreme trans activists were saying like 2 years ago when they would throw rocks or whatever, they would be literally physically assaulting feminists that were trying to get together. And I just hate this. I hate it. It's like, and even if you're like even if you hate all men, even if you absolutely, no matter what, any man entering by man, I mean adult human male, any man entering a women's room is a gross violation. You have to, at some point, think about the moral high ground that you are ceding, right? That this is a big culture war and the optics are freaking terrible. They're terrible. And now a whole bunch of us are in this position where we want to distance ourselves from the extreme behavior of a few individuals. We also don't want to cause pile-ons because many of us, like me, have been canceled. So we see the dynamics of cancel culture. And if you start calling somebody out, then everybody else jumps on them. So we don't want to do that. But we want to, we don't all want to be painted with this brush that it's like the people, the really extreme people, they're not helping. They're not helping anything get better. They're walking us backwards, I think.
Wait, I think we actually have, I can't believe this, Mr. Medicare, Daddy Jim in the chat.
The real
That's
Mr.
amazing.
Medicare in the flesh.
No, I think it's actually really him. That's crazy.
Well, Mr. Medicare, also a shout out to Tux Loves You, friend of the show, who created that
Super Gun 64.
Yeah, Super Gun 64.
Ethan. And Mr. Medicare actually reviewed Super Gun 64
That's right.
on stream. So there you go. Tux is a good friend of ours. He may be doing some stuff for us in the future. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But so anyways, I think what's really interesting is that TERFs, they find themselves in a very weird position because the modern left basically uses the word TERF as National Socialism, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, politically, in the political right, I mean, we basically, a lot of people view them as feds, infiltrators, bad faith people. Like, there's this one account in particular. Well, maybe she'll come on the show one day. You know who I'm talking about, Lev. Radfem, no know who?
Oh, yes, exactly.
No, but so they're in a very awkward position because it seems that neither side wants them. But I think that just by circumstance, they have to sway more to the political right. But what I wanted to ask, I guess, we don't shy away from controversial questions, and we'll get to the topic of the show. But Rose, how do you were saying about your transition? If you agree with the sort of biological distinction between men and women, then how do you place your own self and identity on the, I guess, gender spectrum? Like, how do you conceptualize your own, how shall I say, transness or womanhood or so forth? Like, how do you view yourself?
Well, I view myself as a woman, but the thing is, I can't force other people to see that and agree with that. And that's something which a lot of this debate seems to have lost perspective on. Like, you can identify however you want, but you cannot force people to accept that identity as reality. That's what the biggest that's one of the biggest problems that we have with this whole thing. Because when I've tried to look at how someone who is non-binary can actively define what it is that makes them non-binary, the answer always comes up the same, which is they simply identify as such. And it's the same with like trans men and trans women now. Like, there's so much focus on how like saying adult human female is really, really offensive, and like as they're erasing women in that kind of term, but they're also erasing everything to be every form of identity to the point where it doesn't matter what you say you are, because everything automatically just becomes the same. Everything becomes watered.
And do you think that even aesthetically, this is something that could be seen in a lot of the styles today that are considered to be popular among, or at least kind of forced into the Zoomer culture, where there doesn't really seem to be any consistent molds of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman? I mean, this isn't new. Like, we've seen this in the 80s and 70s. I mean, Nina, you know what I'm talking about.
Lev, stereotypes are rampant. I mean, there's incredibly rigid stereotypes right now about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. Extremely. I mean, porn culture is a much bigger thing now. Kids are exposed to porn at an earlier age. Women are, I mean, literally, there are trans rights activists that refer to the vulva as the front hole. Like, that's what that's how women are
But if we're
referred
specifically
to.
talking about, let's say, something like non-binariness, there it does seem that people are adopting more of this androgynous look about them, with not really being sure whether somebody's a man, whether somebody's a woman.
No, the actual people that assert non-binary identities, that's very rare. That's very, very rare. In fact, the most frequently what I see is very femmy women asserting it, or bearded men.
What do you mean, like in terms of feminine women, I guess, but I mean, there's a sort of.
I mean, women who are performing women who are going out of their way to put on makeup.
I think that's the thing, though, is that there is very much like a performativity to, not to like say, like people like Judith Butler, right, or anything, but there is sort of like a performativity in terms of hyper online personas of like, this is my cat girl streamer that looks like an anime woman. This is actually Robert Mariani, who used to run Jacobite magazine. He had this great term called the M2M, the male to male trans, referring to these like masculinity guru types that have the Reddit beard and the I'm a Giga Chad.
The Jack Murphy.
Yeah, the Jack Murphy types. Basically, they're grifters that are trying to like sell you a very like reified picture of masculinity. That is like such a brilliant term, male to male transsexual. But at the same time, though, I think that. Well, Nina, you were talking about in the 80s and the 90s how there was still a contingent, I think, in drag culture where they were basically equated with homosexuality, that they weren't a separate thing. But along the lines, it just became the trans seems to have taken the capstone of the whole like alt identity lifestyle. It seems that like like even gay men and lesbians don't exist anymore. They're or the
tomboys.
The tomboys and lesbians don't exist. They're non-binary now. Now they're MB kids.
Not really. It's sort of complicated, but yeah, lesbians
I think lesbians never existed. Okay, lesbians, women are more fluid. And I think 90% of lesbians have probably been with the man.
All
Whereas,
right,
like,
shut
gay men
up,
are probably more
Gio.
pure.
All right. Well, hold on. Getting back to the original point, because while I agree with
I'm a lesbian truther, okay?
all right,
I'm
while I
lesbian
agree
truther.
with what oh, look at that nuzzling with the cat. While I agree with what Nita's talking about, I do have one issue with it, just in terms of my own experiences living in New York City, seeing the kind of styles that come about. There do happen to be many instances that I've noticed of women adopting this more of, like, like the whole stereotype of the short colored hair, like the blue hair, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's not as big as it was before. Maybe it's dying out. I'm not exactly sure. But this is kind of more of what I'm saying when I'm talking about not really belonging to one stereotype of another stereotype, but also not really being defined as anything, not really living up to any idea of a certain archetype. So I don't know, Rose, do you notice the kind of things that I'm talking about here? Is this just something that existed and now it's kind of going away? Or what do you make of that particular thing? How prevalent is it?
Well, a lot of this just comes from queer culture. There's been something which has been around, I'd say, really the last 15 years, when it kind of morphed from what was more kind of traditional gay and lesbian culture. And it's took on a lot more of the kind of radical angles that the movement from like the 70s and the 80s embraced. And it's almost like bringing that back. So a lot of these people just look exactly like they do from within the queer community. You'll see a lot of women who will have short hair, usually wearing dungarees, thick glasses, piercings, men who will have facial hair, look like, but they'll put on some glitter. They'll put a bit of glitter on their cheeks, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I'm a glitter goth," which is the kind of thing that some of them say, and then from that it just morphs into, well, I'm actually non-binary because I really like these masculine things, but I also like putting on fairy wings, and that makes me feel pretty, and I like being told that I'm pretty, but I'm also a man. And you can get some quite. Sometimes it can be a bit weird. Like, I know someone from within the community who's like, it basically looks like a Viking. It's like absolutely like built to hell. Like he's proper ripped. But he's like that. And I think he kind of identifies as non-binary. And he's actually someone who, if you were to make fun of him for it, he'd probably be able to, you'd at least be able to knock you out in one punch.
Like I think non-binary is ascendant because it's pure faith now, right? Like this stuff started with people that actually made their physical appearance mimic the opposite sex. So there was a material element to it, but it's become more and more of a religion. And like, what is more pure faith than non-binary? There's like nothing material.
No, but these ideas are kind of like more ancient, not to justify it, but I mean, there's always been within various mystery cults this sort of idea of like the andrine, right? Going back to alchemy and so forth.
But sorry.
No, I wanted to ask you, Rose, like, do you, in terms of like the literature, do you think that the sort of like popularity of non-binary identity, that it's like going to fulfill some grand vision of like disrupting gender or abolishing gender? Do you think that's basically kind of like a LARP and kind of like an easy way to identify with the lifestyle? Or like, what do you?
I think that's something which a lot of these people would genuinely want, or at least think that's what they genuinely want. I don't think it'll be successful in the long term at all. I think that a lot of this stuff will probably fade away within the next 10 to 20 years. I can't see a lot of these people who identify as non-binary now sticking with it, because lots of them already forget their pronouns. Look, Laurie Penny as a good example. Laurie Penny came out as non-binary a few years ago. But she only recently remembered that she came out as non-binary when I think Julie Bindel wrote about her and used female pronouns, and that was when she all of a sudden had a eureka moment. It was like, wait a second, I'm a them. And there's another one in the UK called Jack Monroe, who's done a lot of work on basically like on poverty and like for food poverty. But she came out as non-binary a good couple of years ago. But we'll switch between the non-binary and the woman gender as and when it suits her. In fact, I can't remember the last time she called herself non-binary, but that's generally what she does. Like they kind of have it in their pocket as almost a trump card so they can pull it out and when they remember it. But yet so many of these people will come out as it and then they will just almost fade away. They don't think there's a lot of staying power with this. And the way in which these people try and co-op ancient cultures or other cultures around the world into see this is how they interpret being non-binary. Well, these are very specific cultural roles that they talk about without any
twin
clear
spirit
understanding.
or the Thailand.
Yeah, twin spirit. One of the most interesting ones is the Hijra, which is basically equivalent of a trans woman in like Pakistani culture. And
that's right. Yeah.
And with the Hijra, they'll try and paint the image of they were accepted as women before the evil imperialist British came over and made them into third class citizens. But Hijra were traditionally tax collectors. Now, that's not a role which is particularly valued by society. Because nobody wants to really be paying taxes. It's a role which has a lot of stigma with it.
Is it similar to
eunuchs back?
I was just about to say, is it similar to the eunuchs where certain people had these roles specifically because they thought of and functioned slightly differently than other people, where certain roles, I don't know, like did society dictate
They're the
them?
ultimate,
Did they decide to?
Bugman Janny class, basically. Like they could fulfill technical roles while not being distracted by certain elements of sexuality. That's why they were placed in guard of the harems.
It could well be. I mean, it could well be. It would make sense that because a lot of these different identities that they like to co-opt, they all had very specific roles within their culture. Like Two-Spirit people had a specific role. Like these aren't just I'm now identifying as a woman and the society will treat me exactly as a woman as though there is no difference. Like, no, they have a specific role made for you. And that's what you fall into. Now, yes, that some cultures might be very accepting of that role. Other ones might have that role and associate it with a lot of stigma. But these aren't, if you want to try and compare this to be like, right, this is non-binary, just remember that these are cultural things. These aren't genders. These aren't scientific genders. Bear in mind, most of
they're not sexes.
Well, yeah. Well, most of the neo-genders, they can't even give a definition to. Like, try and get one to define trigender. Like, what does a trigender transition look like? How does a trigender person go about their day? And it's just, we feel like we're three genders in one. But, like, what does that mean? None of it means anything in normal language.
Well, this is the other thing that I've noticed, even when it comes to aesthetics of the flags. There has been a tremendous emphasis on having these various flags with these various colors. And I would compare that to, let's say you're looking at a country's flag, and you would have some nice-looking eagle and a lion and, unicorn or whatever. You have certain animals that relate to mythology, which people can resonate with. My big, I don't know if concern is the right word here, but just something that I'm noticing is that a lot of younger people online, a lot of Zoomers, they're putting so much emphasis on the pronouns and on the genders. Yes, but as far as what exactly is behind that, what are they bringing to the table? What is the mythology that they are living? Because it seems very empty. Like at least I could say like with Alexander Bard, who's a wonderful guest friend of the show, he talks about a lot of the people who don't really identify with particular genders or who are part of the gay and lesbian culture, that they, for the majority of time, were the outsiders. They were in the periphery, and in a way they served a shamanistic role to society. They were part of this underbelly of society that made it interesting, that made it unique, but now there's not even that aspect to it. So I'm curious, Rose, like what are you seeing in terms of online culture, how it's handling a lot of these various things that are that they're being kind of sucked into right now, it seems.
Well, a lot of it's just a trend. A lot of it's just a way of being able to fit in with each other and just, get your oppression points easily. Because one of the big things that people like now is the whole idea of like the pyramid of oppression, as it were, where the more oppressed you are, the more social credit that can give you. And the most, like, the least oppressed person is the cishet white male, so they're right down at the bottom, and they will regularly be derided as, like, bigoted, pale, stale male, that kind of thing. Not very valued by more progressive cultures. So how do you get out of that if you're a cishet white male? Well, you could identify as bisexual. I know of people within the queer community who would call themselves bisexual, but were actually only interested in women. That was a thing. Friends of mine would knew a lot of these people. But an easier one which really gets you the most points, is to come out as trans and come out as a special gender, and that really jumps you up. I mean, that puts you above biological women easily, because people don't understand your gender, and so that has a big appeal to this new world where what you are is becoming more important than who you are, right? So, especially with Zoomers, like, everything is very politically charged. Everything is very focused on, like, all of these different, and being diverse and inclusive, and all of this focus does seek to kind of exclude some of the uncool identities, like being a man, and increasingly being a woman.
Nina?
Nina?
Oh, yes.
It's just a religion. It's just a religion in the age where so many people have lost religion, and this was just the thing that was lying around that took hold. So much of it is just straight up religious behavior.
I'd say religious behavior. It's definitely there's definitely. I wouldn't say it's strictly a religion, but they do latch onto it as though it is one.
It's more of a mystery cult. It's more of a Gnostic. It's like a secular form of Gnosticism, where the gnosis is to achieve an escape of the conditions of the body, the way in which alchemy and various other mystery cults would perceive it. Even within various forms of tantra and so forth in Eastern cultures, it very much is like, I agree with people like Eric Vogelin, who talk about how every sort of millenarian political movement behind it is like a form of this like weird secularization of gnosis, where it's like, if I become non-binary, then I'm disrupting gender. I am freeing myself of the conditions and the parameters of this sort of false, evil, demiurgic society, and the real, being of light, which is my own transness. That is like the true, manifestation. Right?
But then if you're comparing that to Gnosis, and I know, Gio, you're not a big fan of the Gnostics, but when you're comparing it to various tantric sects and things that require delving into what exactly is going on in the world, it seems like a lot of this new culture is incredibly shallow. There doesn't seem to be that much beyond just the things that people are duplicated.
Like, the problem is when you actually look at the foundations and the foundational texts of the modern trans movement. Like, you have, it's funny, last night I was talking about this with Astral and Beyond Woke and Problematic, who we should get on the show.
You have Judith Butler. What a great foundational text.
No, but see, the thing is, Judith Butler, she was butchering Michel Foucault and Deleuze and Guattari, because when you actually read 1,000 Plateaus, if you specifically read the text on the essay on becomings, becomings. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm terrible. I studied D&G at the when I was in my master's program and all that. I think, like, when you actually understand it, what they mean is within the transitory phase, within a element of like being imperceptible and resisting a rigid, what they call a molar identity. That is what they mean. They don't mean like go and be another form of molar identity. They mean that, like, to resist a sort of particular instantiation of identity. That is what they mean, because when they talk about like even though it's like the story itself is bullshit, but it's kind of like interesting, the Castaneda thing, Don Juan, and they talk about indigenous culture. I can't say native because I live in Canada. That's a big no-no. they talk about how it's not really an identity, but rather it is a mode of being that can sort of peer behind the fabric of a particular form of society and socialization for various purposes, for various spiritual purposes. And then he talks about this in his Francis Bacon book as well. But so, and even Michel Foucault, like he's talking about resisting identity. That is not like what modern queer theory, in terms of literature, what's been built up. That's not, nowadays the goal. Now it's like very much an affirmation of identity. So it's like, it's a lot of people that have read these foundational texts very poorly. Like even me, like I had a Frankfurt School professor who, she was basically a radical feminist in the 80s, right? And she's like, everything that you can find in Judith Butler, all of her insights have basically been enunciated better by Michel Foucault. So yeah, there you go. Like, I mean, there's some things about Butler that is kind of true, like the performativity thing, but she's like, thing is, Judith Butler is basically just a neoliberal nowadays, okay? That is it. Judith Butler is just like the perfect neoliberal, whether she wants to admit it or not. Or does Judith Butler go by she or whatever? It's like, all of that shit is basically just like this weird form of the neoliberal social order.
But if there is an affirmation of identity, what is the identity? If the identities keep being switched up all the time, if they're not really as rigid, then yes.
But
Nina.
they're not supposed to be material identities. There's something more going there. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so if you go to my blog, you will see a cleaned up copy of an email exchange that happened regarding my local bike club. And because the cult is coming to my local bike club, and they ruin everything. This cult rips apart communities.
I hated cyclists enough. Now they have
to. Yes. And the thing is, this really, so much of it has nothing to do with trans-identified people at all. It's the mainstream. It's the fucking allies. It's these people that,
Do trans people go for bike rides a lot?
None ever. Now, who the hell cares? It's irrelevant. But they're also talking about non-binary.
Some of those Reddit trans people look like they need. I mean, I look like I need a bike rider too. I mean, come on, but you know. What I mean.
Well, they did. I think it was Pink News or one of these like LGBT news outlets. Just a few weeks ago, did an article on how the outside is for queers as well. Because
queer hiking. Okay,
yes,
I'd like to read part of this. Okay, so somebody says like, oh, we have this sex checkbox and that's very exclusionary. What about non-binary cyclists? We need to be inclusive to them. And then a bunch of people say like, well, let's get rid of that checkbox then. Boom, problem solved.
Did you see that video of the trans?
Wait. You gotta let Nina.
Please, Gio, please.
Oh, sorry. There's a trans ranch.
Gio, what the fuck?
Please.
Sorry.
Shh. So some people said, well, I'm not going to renew my membership until you seek guidance from the Uniting Pride Center, the LGBT, mostly T now, Q+++ Center. So they want the bike club, which has no resources, to seek guidance from the local church. And this keeps going on. And finally, I chime in because I'm already the village turf and I have nothing to lose. All right. The bike club has always been welcoming cyclists of all faiths. The club should not prioritize any one religion over others. Not everyone believes in God. Likewise, not everyone believes in gender identity. It's great that everyone has their own faith, including gender faith, but that's not the club's business. Believers pressuring the club to seek direction and guidance from the up center is akin to pressuring it to seek guidance from a single church. Checkboxes offering various gender identities are equivalent to checkboxes offering various Christian denominations. If you ask, what is your gender identity? You might as well ask, what church do you attend? Or what is your personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Such questions are intrusive and inappropriate. Club members are free to discuss their religious beliefs with each other, but the club itself should take no position so that all feel welcome, including atheists. So that's what I wrote, knowing that, some people would be pissed off, but I did not write it to piss off people. I wrote it because it's true and because I hate seeing this happen and because clearly the club's is in trouble either way, no matter what happens.
And what's the aftermath?
Well, you can read the whole thing, but I wanted to. I'm building up to a point
Yes.
here about incoherence.
You look like an archetypal cyclist, Nina. I hate to say.
So, immediately, this response happens to the whole list. There are those in this community who are non-binary. I have non-binary friends, for example, who are chromosomally neither XX nor XY. So to deny they exist and insist that all humans have to fit into one or two boxes is unscientific nonsense. Do you want me to read that again?
Well, it's interesting how, of all this talk about how you can't really define sex, but these all of her non-binary friends, they all just so happen to have chromosomes that reflect the fact that they are non-binary, and they all know this for a fact. But also, it wouldn't matter whether they did or they didn't. So it's a really predictable point, because you're not going to be able to disprove that. But I see more
it's
and
like
more ways.
fibromyalgia in middle-aged white women.
I mean, I'm gonna reread that because it is so incoherent. Like, people's jaws drop when they see this, and it's said with such conviction. There are those in this community who are non-binary. I have non-binary friends, for example, who are chromosomally neither XX nor XY. So to deny they exist and insist that all humans have to fit into one of two boxes is unscientific nonsense. I want all of my friends to be able to join Bike Club, including those who are not just one of two gender identities. Some may make a counter-argument allowing for a narrow range of exceptions. Quote, oh, for those folks with certifiable blah, blah, blah. But it's ridiculous to think that our knowledge of human experience is definitive. We already know about some scientific exceptions. There may be more, and it doesn't matter even if there aren't more. It hurts no one, and it's so easy to be accommodating. There is no need to gaslight those whose identities differ. Differing gender identities are not akin to differing religions. If anyone wants to be a part of a club that purposefully isn't accepting of all my friends, I would like to suggest they find a different club. I want all my friends with all of their gender identities to feel like they belong in Bike Club.
But they're not women. By their definition, they're not women. This is one of the this is like a friend of mine, some friends of mine rather, used to be involved in roller derby in London, which is a women's sport. And in order to be inclusive, you need to include non-binary people, but as a way of validating their gender identity, you need to let the non-binary people compete as women within the women's thing. It's like, if you really wanted to be respectful, why not just point out, no, this is for women. You, by your, you have explained that you are not a woman. You can't come to this thing because you are a woman, because you're not a woman.
But they have trans cyclist clubs and.
Well, no, they don't have trans cyclist clubs. But I want to say this is not a women's cycling club. Men and women and people of any identities, they're already welcome.
Oh, right.
It's not a women's thing. There's no barrier to women. What I was saying
this is nonsensical then.
It's totally incoherent and nonsensical. I was just saying, let's not, seek guidance from this one church when we're not seeking guidance from all the other churches. Like, this isn't the club's business.
It just sounds like it's a board church.
My church should have guidance upon all of society, Nina.
Sure,
so
you do.
Sorry.
And we're going to get into that in a moment. But to what you were saying, Nina, it almost sounds like a lot of these people are bored church wives that have nothing better to do than to try and squeeze in something that they think would make Martha look better than Betty in the eyes of the community.
That is literally what is happening, actually. Literally. But my point in all of this is that response was incoherent. It was also very threatening. And that is the whole point of this. And that is why she's saying non-binary and she's not saying trans. She is invoking the most incoherent of all of this, because what is underneath all of this and what this is actually about is just one tribe dominating another tribe. And so it's just like in Orwell's 1984, where if the party says 2 + 2 = 5, it doesn't matter. We all know that doesn't make any sense. That's not the point. The fact that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5 just reveals that it's a pure power play. And this is a pure power play. Its incoherence is a feature, not a bug.
That's the thing, though. There was a great 4chan copy paste where it's about Well, the term came from Borzy, actually, which I don't know if he'll come on the show.
It's interesting having
but
the
they
words
call it-
great and 4chan copy paste in the same sentence.
Oh my God, Lev. No, but it was about the nature of what Borzy termed humiliation rituals. It's like what the Soviets called in the declining period around the 1980s after Brezhnev. What did they call it? Hyperpolitics, Lev, or hyperdiscourse? Where it was like they would say one thing, but they knew that the vast majority of society didn't believe it, but they had to pretend like it was real. Like, the grain stocks are perfect. Yeah. They're
it's like that Solzhenitsyn quote about like they know they're lying, they know that you know that they're lying, and so on and so forth. Yeah,
if someone can help me out, they either called it hyperdiscourse or hyperpolitics, where basically there was a fundamental discontinuity between the official channels of knowing and knowledge and what the vast majority of people could see with their own eyes, that they had to wait in fucking bread lines.
And Michael says,
were the bread lines actually real, Lev, or was that
yes? No, they definitely were. And Michael and
they're
so coming back, and the bread lines are coming back. They're coming back into style in Russia.
The grain stocks are amazing. China's actually buying. Lev, did you see the report on the BBC? Only 600 Russian troops, not 6 million, Lev. 600. Russian
blah, blah,
troops
blah.
died.
All right, Michael says, Nina is right. It's all about power because it's all Marxist underpinned. But to flip this up a bit,
I don't think it's really Marxist.
I was having a conversation with Hemingway earlier on Twitter today. And there was an article that I read before talking about, article who was talking about the right liberals and how much the right liberals are in the dark when it comes to what's going on right now. This was specifically from Compact magazine, which some of you guys may have heard about. But what I don't like that I'm seeing right now, to the point that Rose was bringing up earlier in the verbal harassment going on of Jen, I believe, is that it seems that it's very difficult for people who are on the reactionary side to see a difference between, let's say, old school gay dudes who just want to settle down and get married and whatever, and people who make it a mission to brainwash young kids into their particular way of seeing reality. And there is a clear difference between the two. And I don't really see a lot of people who are on the reactionary side making that difference. Instead, I think they want to lump everything into one thing, and they are going to create a fifth column through the process of trying to go against everything that they hate.
One leads to the other.
Everything leads to everything else. That's not a good argument. You could say that, I don't know, that...
Yeah, but Lev, it took only about 15 to 10 years from gay marriage to be legalized to, like, drag time story hour. Like, that's a huge, like,
15 to 10...
shift.
It hasn't even been 10 years.
And your proposition... I mean, but your proposition is what, then, as far as how to solve that?
I think it really goes back to the picture of the human subject that a particular society adopts to begin with, that can let in certain distortions, I would say, of the subject.
Not really, philosophy, Gio. No philosophy. Philosophy time is over. I'm talking about policies.
I'm trying to coach it in like more PC terms.
No, you can't coach it. See, that's the problem. If you're trying to coach it in something, it's like you're trying to give us poison and cover it in sugar so that we don't know that it's poison.
No, I'm just saying that when you sort of break down
Nina knows what I'm talking about.
They can't be put back up because
the right wing,
live in a fundamentally libertine society.
And you're trying to bring in the right wing death squads by painting them like a nice neutral blue color.
You're saying that I want to kill people or whatever. That's like not. What
I'm saying that you advocate for policies that are going to lump in people who happen to be more liberal-minded, or people who are gay, or people who have an alternative lifestyle, along with the people who are going to.
I think that it shouldn't be normalized, it shouldn't be whatever, but gay men are different because there have always been gay men throughout society who have greatly contributed to civilization, probably because they're not distracted by women. But there's been few and far between. I think, and this isn't my point. This is, Jack the Perfume Nationalist point. Jugs, by the way, shout out to Jugs in the chat. I see her again.
Hey, Jugs.
His point being that gay men have done great things because they've always been sort of like hiddenness or sort of like a form of oppression against them. So they kind of like need that as a spark of inspiration to actually achieve great feats in science and art and culture. But nowadays, because the gay identity has become so bourgeois, it's become so, normalized, not just normalized, it's become literally passé. Gay men are passé. Therefore, they're just in the same position of cultural decay as everyone else.
So you want to bring them back in the closet or persecute gay men who are...
would greatly benefit from being at least somewhat back in the closet.
See, I don't even have to say anything.
Policy.
I don't even have to add an argument. I should just let Gio speak, and the argument works out for me. So Nina and Rose, what do you guys think of this?
It was not even 10 years from gay marriage to be legalized to now having like children and hormones, Lev.
Yes,
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say same-sex marriage is what caused that to happen.
No, obviously.
There are a lot more of a factors. So if you were to focus entirely on, because I've seen a lot of people do this, it's like, there have been memes where it's like since 2015, we've had things like the drag queen story hour, we've had like drag kids, like all of this kind of degenerate shit. But I wouldn't say that. I would say that for a long time, the biggest arguments for same-sex marriage were coming from more conservative gay and lesbian men and women, as opposed to the more queer radicals. And the reason for that is that for the radicals, they see marriage as assimilation into the cis heteronormative culture. They despise it. They despise the idea of marriage. Some of them will be hypocrites and will end up getting married and using those rights, but a lot of them dislike what Western society is. But these people also do have influence in various circles, and I think that even if same-sex marriage hadn't been legalized in America or in the UK or anywhere else, the progressive wave is enough that we would have been seeing the same things like Drag Queen Story Hour, and if anything, progressives would have then tried to use Drag Queen Story Hour to jump up to push for support for same-sex marriage, which would be absolutely mortifying for your average gay man.
Here's the thing, though. Here's one base point, Lev. You think I'm just like some kind of Jerry Falwell or, Nick Fuentes just bashing gay people. No, here's the real based and red pill point. That is kind of like, I'm going to piss off both the trads and people and liberal mushheads like you, Lev, ditto heads, as Rush Limbaugh, R.I.P., God rest his soul, would say. The real point is that when it comes to gay men in particular, a lot of them resisted gay marriage, like what Rose of Dawn was saying, because they lived within a different picture of sexuality and monogamy that genuinely was transgressive and genuinely did produce great works of art and culture. And they said, and this is coming right from Michel Foucault, they said that they don't want marriage because that is too bourgeois, that is too proletariat, that is too normalized. And now what you have this hideous, I would say, gelded creature like Dave Rubin posting the fucking baby pictures. This is the problem with conservative gay people in terms of like, not conservative, their politics.
What's wrong with Dave Rubin posting the baby pictures?
Because it's disgusting and everyone sees it so, Lev. But more or less, it's a detriment to the children. It's a detriment to conservatives. But more importantly, it's a detriment to gay identity because now gays have lost their edge culturally. That is the problem.
But gay people not all gay people want to be edgy. Not all of them want to be trendy or come out with these like great works. Like I know plenty of gay people who are just slobs.
Gio, you're saying like Tim Dillon, for example, but Gio, you're saying exactly, you're agreeing with Rose, yet a lot of the things that you're talking about here, they can't just exist in space. They have to have some kind of a foundation of what kind of policy decision you want to enact so that your worldview exists. Otherwise, you're just talking.
I'm not talking about policy. I'm not talking, like, this is going beyond policy. I mean, I don't, like, that's another discussion for another time. What I'm saying, though, is that basically they are trying to take what was traditionally a subversive group and sort of bring them into the fold of bourgeois normalcy. Because don't forget, it's not just a political thing, because there were men, I know this is kind of a controversial point, but even within fascist movements, there were gay men. There were, the homo-fascist thing is the actual thing.
Still are.
Yeah.
But when it comes to
By the way, we should get Twink Revolt on the stream.
yes, but when it comes to Gio, but when it comes to
Twink Revolt,
and this is a question, I know where Nina went, but this is a question for both Rose and Gio. When it comes to the matter of choice, what you're saying is that now there was, maybe you could say that it was pushed artificially, astroturfed in some way, but either way, what ended up happening now is that people have a choice. It isn't like people are being lined up and forced to marry as well. So my question to you is, if regardless of any cultural changes that have occurred because of this, if we're purely talking about, do you advocate for there being more choice or less choice that people would have, which one would it be, Gio? And which one would it be, Rose? In fact, let's start with Rose. As far as the question of choice goes.
Yeah, start with Rose, then ask me again.
Yeah.
I was typing
Okay, so I'm fully in support of same-sex marriage, right? What I wouldn't be in support of is effectively forcing religions to fall in line with it. That's because I think that that's an argument for those various churches or whatever those religious movements are. So they have the sanctity of their marriage, because not all marriage ceremonies or ideas of marriage are the same the world over. And so, ultimately, as far as the eyes of the law are concerned, marriage is just a legal agreement. So you can have that. But if you want, but it's up to for example, it should be up to like various churches, various denominations, whether they want to include same-sex marriage within their own spheres. I think that, and I wouldn't want to be telling a Christian that they have to accept this. I would never want to do that, because it just seems wrong to remove the choice from them. But I think it's important that, if to make sure that people have that right within law to do so. I don't think that being against that is, I get the argument that, this isn't conservatism. Like, I get that, because, well, conservatives haven't been conserving anything for a long time. All conservatives ever do is hold the line for what liberals wanted 10 or 20 years before. There's like that Stone Toss comic, which is just like neo-Marxists are the real transphobes, and like, that is kind of the way that conservatives go. Like, that they're generally not very successful in conserving things anyway.
And they're also not the ones that seem to have the fire in their belly either, as far as they're kind of settled into this idea of being supported by various corporate interests, and they don't really feel like they have to defend liberty.
But that's what I mean, though, Lev. You like the Dave Rubin thing. Okay, renting out a woman's womb to go into what is just an unnatural environment. I mean, come on, I don't know, Lev.
This is where radical feminists are totally on the same side as Gio in terms of opposition of surrogacy.
It's the 80s all over again with Randy Reagan and Andrea Dworkin going against pornography. I agree 100%.
Surrogacy is reprehensible.
Exactly.
I don't see that as being
There are so many unwanted, like, the children that need to be adopted. Why should you? Why? Like, it's just. I don't know.
They're luxury items.
Exactly. They are a luxury item for bourgeois gay men to prance around. It's disgusting.
Well, but not just for gay men, but for all sorts of people.
No, but also these, these upper class, they want their designer kids, and now they're going to talk about CRISPR gene editing.
There are
okay.
To give the devil their due, there are a lot of scary things that may be happening in terms of gene editing that we have to look out for. But again, to me, it comes back to something that I think people are all too quick to run away from, which is, again, the question of freedom, the question of what rights people have. So to the point that Rose was bringing up, if you're in the Christian community and certain things are looked down upon, then fine, you're like an Amish community or whatever. But if we're talking about actual laws that are implemented in states, in countries, things of that nature, Gio, are you in favor then of there being, not in, let's say, Christian communities, but in general, in terms of the law, are you in favor of there being gay marriage, for instance?
Nah, not really.
Okay,
I mean,
there
should
we
be
go.
maybe
So if
some
you're
like civil union thing, but like the problem is that when it comes to marriage in general, in terms of a state contract, I mean, I'm not a libertarian by any means. I was for many years. I think like the original intent of marriage was very much a ceremonial and religious thing. So by definition, there is, at least in my church, no such thing as gay marriage. But when it comes to marriage in terms of the state, that's a different thing, because that, like, in Canada, for instance, if you live with someone for more than 6 months, I believe, you are technically, under the eyes of the law, just as much in quote unquote married than other people. So this is what I mean in terms of a religious ceremony. By definition, unless you belong to some United Church bullshit, there's no such thing as gay marriage. But when it comes to the state, that's different. I mean,
But how is that
Caesar,
different from the
situation?
Yeah, but how is that different from the situation right now? I don't really see you being satisfied with letting Babylon be Babylon and letting the religious communities be the religious communities.
Because it never works that way, because inevitably Babylon will come for us. That's
just like ancient Rome talking about how we're going to have these invaders coming in, so we got to invade them first. That's been the right-wing argument for a lot of these cultural war things, where you want to get ahead of the problem that you think is going to be coming your way. Yes, obviously by taking over the institutions and by enacting your own kind of order and not letting gay people get married because of your order.
We have the gift of hindsight, Lev. We have, like, not even, like Nina was saying, not even 10 years it took for that.
We don't know if that was a direct, but we're contesting whether one caused the other. Where I make the connection is that the lobbying groups that were lobbying for gay marriage, once they achieved that, they could not let go of their money train. They were set up for fundraising, and they had to find something else to keep them going. But notice
how they also had to topple the discourse of the gay men in particular, to now gay men are viewed just as equally harshly as, cis men or women or whatnot. So there had to be a greater, more radical group to push forward a cultural agenda that had to take place. I think it was directed. It wasn't just, I mean,
it was directed. I think it was directed. Yeah. I don't think it happened organically at all. I think there was money behind it.
No, I could definitely agree about the policy questions, but then going back to, real quick, Gio, going back to Rose, when it does come to this idea of we see a slippery slope, we're not sure if whatever's happening right now is specifically connected to gay marriage, but like Nina said, we do recognize that there are certain people at play that would take advantage of them having money and the need to make more money and to enact certain things. But do you also see there being a problem with more conservative, reactionary-leaning people wanting to nip it in the bud to such an extent that they would get rid of gay marriage entirely to prevent these other slippery slopes from coming in?
Well, it's important to get it right where the slippery slope has begun. And where I think you got to ask the question, is it same-sex marriage which has started it? Well, no, it isn't. There are other parts within the more kind of progressive queer movements which are kind of very much unconnected to what basically what I'm trying to say is there's a big difference between like almost like LGB, if you want to call it, lesbian and gay specifically, because that's what a lot of them would just kind of be in the 70s, and the more kind of radical queer movements that would generally spring up from the late, basically from like Stonewall riots, which was one of the biggest kind of turning points for a lot of this. Because prior to that, there was like kind of gay movements would refer to themselves as homophile. Thank God they don't anymore, but that's how they would kind of label themselves, and they went for more of a conservative look. But then during the 60s, when everyone got nice and radicalized, kind of like what's happening now, gay rights movements got like that as well. And Stonewall wasn't necessarily the thing which kicked that off, but it was part of the many things which like kind of forced that change. And then eventually you had almost two kind of movements. You had what was formerly the homophile movement, but then you also had the more like gay liberation front style movements. So ones which would name themselves after after like Pol Pot and like Cuban revolutionary groups. Like there was a lot of these, like because a lot of them had ties to the very far left. Like they would have ties to communist militias. They and so you have these kind of like two very different kind of strains of it already, and the radical side kind of died down a bit during the 80s, kind of sprung up a little bit again during the AIDS crisis, but mostly by that point the more kind of moderate side of it almost took over. But you still had people like Mario Miele in the background, and people who, you know, interestingly would never talk about gender identity, but they would talk a lot about being pedophiles or diddling dead bodies.
Pachylathia,
yeah, like they would talk a lot more about that than trans stuff. Like it's really, really weird to read over a lot of these old books, but yeah, they barely mention the trans stuff, but diddling kids, like you know, like.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of your content, you have the one series, Pillars of the Community.
Oh,
which,
yes.
You covered our well, I hate to say in this stream we've milked some of our most popular streams have been on CWC. But do you think see, my problem here, this is inside baseball between me and Lev, because his thing is that he thinks that a future hypothetical evil is worse than an current evil to stop it. So I don't know about that. But do you notice that sorry, Lev, but do you think that you mentioned the beginning those sort of like early text-based trans websites that they had a flavor of cheese pizzaism? Because I want to avoid the term for YouTube.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Of course.
But do you feel that is a problem, or do you think that's just an unfair stereotype that for some reason it seems that a lot of the trans activism, at least, is very comfortable with expressing a desire for like let's call them underage people for the algorithm getting involved or being
or like that kid in Times Square thing.
Desmond.
So I would say that these kinds of websites weren't particularly pizzery, but they were weird. They were very weird, filled with people who weren't properly socially adjusted and would come out with very, very strange comments and would try and act overly flamboyantly feminine. Like, I remember I actually used one of these websites once because I needed someone to talk to after I came out to my parents, and my mum said some pretty harsh things to me. And I needed somewhere to vent. And this was like the only place. And so I typed about it. And then someone responded, like, three of us, like, me, like this woman, this Tranner, and two others, well, apparently all sitting in their room, drinking tea and eating scones, and they all started weeping when they read my post. And I was like, hold on a second. Who the fuck acts like this? Who sits
They're aristocratic women from the Victorian age.
Yeah, just like sitting around having afternoon tea. Like
Jane Eyre.
Like who the hell does that? Like, but this is like what these kinds of people were. They weren't necessarily like kind of the tranners that you see today. These weren't the blue hairs, the ones who pose with baseball bats saying, like punch a turf, that kind of thing. These were just very, very weird people who you just would not be comfortable talking to, even online.
It's like they would have summer wine, but trans, like little like, England.
They would have like very, very few boundaries. Would kind of talk, not necessarily talk about like kind of kink stuff, but would be open about like bodies or whatever. So just so much of it was weird. Like this was for a long time kind of like the trans community as it was very weird. It was filled with very weird people.
It was queer in the academic sense, like term queer.
Kind of, but I wouldn't even necessarily say that. It was, maybe actually, maybe.
And most of them were men, right? They were weird men.
Oh yes. Absolutely.
And do you think that I'm very glad, Rose, that you're acquainted with the literature. Have you ever heard of the book Theory of the Young Girl?
I haven't.
I I think like they would consider this like kind of maybe rad femme or turfy now, but my good friend Impossible Princess on Twitter, she actually did in academia talked about like a lot of how the aesthetic of the young girl in particular is sort of like a perennial spring of innocence, and I think that a lot of trans men in particular, they adopt either, like you were saying, because they have sort of, let's call it, sanitized word, a neurodivergence about them, that they have like a particular sort of proclivity towards like anime and hyperfemininity, and like they have a sort of
or like those anime avatars on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, we see
like
them.
they have an objection about that particular relation to the young girl that I think can come off as like from a trad reactionary perspective can come off as like normalizing pizza related things, right?
Absolutely. So like just to clarify, a trans man is a female to male.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, sorry. I mean like male to female.
I know.
Sorry.
Yeah. I knew what you mean.
Trans-
You knew what you
trans-
meant, but it's like trans men wouldn't be sitting around wearing frilly or some.
No,
might
they have
nowadays.
a different. They have like a different thing. I wonder.
Oh,
what...
they like using names like Kai.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kai. Yeah. Like they like trans men will usually pick the same different types. Like there's normally like 5 names, and it's always ones that are like can be shortened to 3 letters. So there's definitely like that's their thing. No, like trans women are the much more normal frilly dresses and just changing whatever your male name was, just making it feminine. But yeah, there's absolutely specifically I would say with older trans women who come out when they are older seem to be the ones who are very much attracted to this idea of using the image of a young girl as innocence, whereas a trans woman like myself who comes out at a much younger age and transitions at a much younger age, we just seem to be generally the ones that are more adapted to society and understands that sitting around in frilly dresses and pigtails and saying things like, "Oh, us girls love our pampering" and stuff like that. Like we recognize that this is not how people talk.
But why do you think? Why do you think these avatars of the younger anime girls are also found in a lot of reactionary right-wing circles as well? It almost seems like both the left and the right are adopting these things on Twitter right now.
A lot of them just going to be femboys or people who just want to who are just basically like trans thoughts. That's what a lot of them are like.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but even within like surprisingly very far right spaces, there's like the femboy, like catboy. Yeah. I'm not to name names, you know who I'm referring to, but
femboys are definitely a thing on the far right.
Yeah, it seems that I think even like the theory cell side, which I mostly come from the far right, I think there's sort of like a weird thing. But I think like of course, the vast majority of people on the far right are religious and not, they hate all of this. But
no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, look at Hero Alchemy. Hero Alchemy has an avatar of an anime girl, and he's a religious, Christian young man.
Yeah, but anime in the far right, I think, is a different reason than why trans people adopt anime avatars. I think because anime manages to escape Western political categories, and also they have this very archetypal idea of femininity that is more acclimatized to a far right idea of what gender is. So here is a quote from so this is called Preliminary Materials for a Theory of the Young Girl. It's written in a very like poetic, like almost kind of like E. Cummings style. Like there's different fonts everywhere. So the masculine young girl is a paradox in that she is a product of a sort of alienation by contagion. Although the feminine young girl appears as the incarnation of a certain alienated masculine imagery, so imaginary content, there is nothing imaginary about the alienation of this incarnation. It is although concretely that she has eluded those who fantasize the fantasy she populates in order to face and dominate them. As the young girl emancipates herself, blossoms and multiplies, the dream turns into an all-consuming nightmare. It is at this point that her former slave returns to tyrannize yesterday's master. In the end, we witness an ironic epilogue in which the male sex becomes both the victim and the object of its own alienated desire. So, in other words, I think the author, who is the author? Some academic I think from the New School, actually, Lev. Oh, so it's published by Semiotext, so it probably is from the New School. This is by Tikun. I forget the first name. But in other words, they're saying that the young girl has been primarily an object of male desire, but when the young girl becomes this cultural archetype, then it takes on a life of its own. And now, like, the sort of the feminine reclamation of the young girl, particularly the e-girl. But now you have this weird thing where trans people, particularly, you know, male to female, are encapsulated, like they're sort of possessed by this idea of the perfect feminine waifu young girl anime princess. But now it's like they have to become that because they themselves cannot, you know, be that. Like, I know that's like a stereotype.
I know, Nina,
like,
you have a response.
Yeah, to a lot of it. Well, first, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term autogynephilia, right?
Right, yes.
Yes. So, and you're familiar with what's known as Blanchard's 2 types, right?
HST, homosexual, transsexual, and then...
Right. Which is an oversimplification, of course. But one thing... So as Gio is talking about this fetishization of young girls, this makes a lot of women angry. We are pretty pissed off that we are regarded, especially when we're young and vulnerable, we are regarded as, you know, just this object, this symbol.
It's like innocence.
It's grotesque, right? Like real women are not like that. And so we have all that shit. And then we have, you know, like some very pervy autogynephilic guys. And by the way, I am not saying all autogynephiles are perverts, just that the most obnoxious, perviest offenders, autogynephiles are represented quite highly among them.
Yeah.
So there is a correlation.
And as Massive McGee says, can't get a GF, become the GF.
Well, the HSTS, they're different in that they have a sort of like weird, like they've internalized the male gaze because they have body types that can pass, quote unquote, pass as women. And so the HSTS, they're like very like hypersexualized. They're usually like, you know, the Thai ladyboy archetype.
Actually, it's not. The thing is, like, these are very general
I feel dirty
types.
just saying this. Holy crap.
They're very, very general types, and they're sort of a gross oversimplification, but one that you can't, you know, if you're like in the real world and seeing things, you're just like, well, this here is a textbook autogynephile.
Is it true that gay men in particular like despise like very feminine gay men? Like that's the theory, that very feminine gay men become HSTS. Is it true that like gay men in particular...
Who's the gay man here you're asking?
No, but you've been, you know,
I know
gay culture for a long. Go ahead, Rose. Go ahead.
I know several gay men who really, really hate like flamboyant, kind of feminine gay men. Like I wouldn't say necessarily that is what makes some of these people transition, but like there's definitely like this thing of like gay people who will be like, oh, I hate the gays. It's like, but you are one. It's like, yes, I know. That's why I hate them. Like
several of them have been on the show, actually.
Like it's definitely a thing within the community. Like I don't know whether it's like, you know, overwhelming. I don't think it would be, but I definitely know people. I know one guy who's like pretty camp himself, but he really doesn't like other camp guys. Really, really doesn't like him, and it's kind of funny.
Men seem to really like to exclude other men from manhood.
Yeah, it's natural.
And there's that one of the other offensive things about some of the worst trans activists is they'll say that they're widening the bandwidth of what it is to be a woman.
Oh yeah.
And they're just like, widen the bandwidth of what it is to be a man. It's like the issue here is men. I think what is desperately needed to solve a lot of problems with this, maybe all of them, is for men to step up and help other men. because instead they just throw men out of manhood, and then they're just like, here's some garbage.
But then the question is,
your
maybe after
bandwidth.
Dave,
no,
I
but
don't
then the
know
question is, what do
nowadays.
you do to make them step up? Well, not make them step up, but what do you do to inspire other men as opposed to just distance them if they don't happen to fall into your stereotype of what a man is? Because I think that a lot of things that are missing today from men's experience is having a certain goal to achieve, having a reason for living. And it goes back to the question of, why should I build a career? Is it just about money? Is it just about, like, am I going to have the kind of family, the kind of loyalty that I imagine existed back in the old days, regardless of whether that was true or not? But there is still, like, this ideal that I'm sure many men want to live up to as being the stereotypical breadwinner, things of that nature. And at least it seems like the culture today does not emphasize a lot of these things for the men, and they do have all these male grifters who come in and waste their time with a lot of bullshit too. But I also notice, and Gio, you may agree with me on this, that there is still, at least with some of like the raw egg Twitter people, there is this sense of brotherhood, that it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter the kind of things that you still have to work on. There is still this trend of enjoying the fact that people around you are making gains in their life, that they're getting better. Men call each other king, things of that nature. So there are certain communities like that are rising up, that I see as being a very positive thing.
I think that basically the problem with that analysis, Nina, is that maybe it was true 10 years ago. It was certainly true with sort of the manosphere, but I think that nowadays the problem is the picture of masculinity has been distorted in general. And so on both sides, you sort of have on the one end, which is a sort of total destruction of masculinity. But the other end, you have what I would call, or rather what Robert Mariani termed the M to M's, who are making it difficult because in order to counterbalance the culture in general, they have to instantiate a very like hyper reified and like hyper performative version of masculinity, which is very not serving anybody, because ultimately it's just a grift. And as we know from people like Jack Murphy, that a lot of it is just a grift. It's just a put on. But I would say that there are genuine sources of masculinity. Lev mentioned Raw Egg Nationalist, who's a good friend of the show, a good friend of mine. Even though I don't have the raw egg bodybuilder body type, maybe one day, who knows. But people are mentioning Valerie Solarnis in the chat, which the reason I hate Valerie is because Andy Warhol was one of my favorite modern artists. He was based in Trad-Pilled, and Valerie was a total psycho. But I would say that when it comes to the literature, it seems that there is who is that woman that wrote the xenofeminist thing? What's her name? She's on Twitter. She actually wrote a personal letter dissing my friend Adam Lair. I forget her name, but it seems that the trans stuff, it's become, when it comes to like the trans feminism stuff, what we were talking about with the young girl, there is a relation where there is a sense of through the distortion of gender itself, it opens up these other realms of thinking of posthumanism and transhumanism. And I think there's some people, like one of them, there's a great Keith Woods video that talked about how there are trans people involved within transhumanism. But God's Dominatrix mentioned Sadie Plant. Sadie Plant is a great author. I love her book. Her book, Zeros and Ones, talks about sort of femininity within the digital world. Great book. She also wrote the book about drugs. Nick's Land. Oh, Lev, I wonder if we get Nick's Land on the show. But before we go on, I wanted to read another passage from Preliminary Theories on the Young Girl. So believe in beauty. The dictatorship of beauty is also the dictatorship of ugliness. It does not signify the brutal hegemony of a certain paradigm of beauty, but rather, more radically, the hegemony of the physical simulacrum as the form of the objectivity of beings. Understood as such, we can say that nothing prevents such a dictatorship from extending over everyone, the beautiful, the ugly, and the indifferent. The young girl does not mind miming submission here and there because she knows it is she dominates. Something in this being's something in this brings her in line with the machoism, the masochism that has long been taught to women, which makes them cede the signs of power to men in order to recover innately the certitude that they possess them in reality. Sexuality does not exist. It is the abstraction and movement of human relations, blah, blah, blah. So, in other words, it seems that with the e-girl, but also with the HSTS, there is this sort of conscious taking on of the commodification of beauty, where they take on this, like, I'm a submissive trad wife that bakes you Sunny Red pies, and, like, you know, I live in a fucking wheat field, right? It seems that there is this weird inversion of that picture of submission in order to, in a way, manipulate the male gaze. And I wonder if, when it comes to like the femboys and the cat girls, you know, I wonder if it's a cat boys, whatever. I don't even fucking know anymore. It's like there seems to be that weird interplay between the commodification of the beautiful young girl and the sort of pantomime of it with certain trans folks. God, I'd use that term folk.
Before with an X, before we get to the end, though, a lot of this philosophy stuff is very interesting. It's out of my particular wheelhouse as far as the kind of things that I'm interested in talking about personally. When it comes to what is actually going to be done right now with the situation we have. We have.
Oh yeah, we didn't speak about the sports thing. That's right.
Well, hold on. It's not just a matter of the sports thing, though. What I want to still get from Nina and Rose before we go is, if you could have a crystal ball and see two divergent ways this could all go, the slippery slope that was talked about before by Gio, and this is something that concern. I'm not going to say concern. I mean, you know what I mean. There is something not quite right about the idea that in order to get rid of something that you perceive to be coming in the way, you're going to have to dig all the way back and remove all of the gains that people have had in terms of the freedom that those freedoms may allow for some, pretty, ugly stuff to sometimes happen along with stuff that's nice. So my question goes to here with the splitting of potential futures. Number one, what would happen if people who are reacting in the negative to not just the drag queen story hour, but also to gay marriage in general, to a lot of the other things that we would describe as being socially progressive in how people are treated? If in order to get rid of this ultimate doom problem that people see coming on the way, you end up getting rid of a lot of these rights, where do you see those? How many of those rights do you guys, and this is for everybody, see being rid of? What would be the after effects of that? And on the other side, if those rights are not gotten rid of, and if nothing really is going to be done as far as other movements by activists to normalize certain things that people find to be disgusting today, where exactly do you see that leading as well? So those are the two questions. Nina, go for it.
You're grinding our very good theory cell discussion for this Libby rights-based conundrum here. I can't believe you. Go ahead,
Nina. Go for it.
Sorry.
Only if Gio won't interrupt.
Yes.
Well, just for that, don't worry about it.
Oh my God. Now I have to go back to what the hell I was thinking before it got derailed. I think, what would satisfy me and a lot of other pissed off feminists is if we had sex-based rights and protections. We want those, clear. We want people to be able to define what a woman is, an adult human female. And we want, our sex-based rights. What our objection to what is happening is that, women's sex-based rights are being eliminated in the name of some kind of lunatic progressivism. And I have never had anything against trans people. I am in favor of people being weird. I am in favor of men wearing dresses and women wearing top hats or whatever. It's like people wear what they want. But sex is real. And it never even occurred to most of us that the people would pretend that it's not real, or that they would lose their freaking minds. But that would just be such a simple way to solve so many problems that are caused by this. And then if people want to talk about, that they find woman face offensive or something like that, they can go ahead and do that. But for me, this isn't like about being personally offended, although it's getting that way. But it's really an issue of just women's rights. So just freaking have them. Meanwhile, what I do see happening is a horrible, horrible backlash. Like that this has just gone way too far out of control. And the backlash is going to hurt all kinds of innocent people that never asked for this.
So do you anticipate... Go on.
I've been friends with weirdos for a long time. I mean, in spite of what people say about me, I have tranny friends. I don't want to see this backlash destroy them.
But in terms of the backlash, this is what I'm curious about. This gets to my question. What do you see the backlash as being? You may say that it's already in effect, but if you were to imagine like a real right-wing backlash to a lot of the things that are going on right now, do you see it coming for a lot of the things that we're used to right now that people on the right would argue are the slippery slope things that ended up creating it in the first place? I would say that they would argue that liberty itself, the idea that we're living in a liberal society, that has to be gotten rid of in order for a lot of these things not to crop up in the future. So,
well, we're pretty decadent right now. I guess I see a backlash taking the form of more kinds of gender enforcement, or gender enforcement going up onto a legal level, right? Like cross-dressing is banned, like period. And these issues with banning trans surgeries, I understand the motivation for that. They pose a real problem for people that have already had these surgeries and need exogenous hormone treatments in order to, not get osteoporosis and die. But I think that some very unsubtle and unnuanced lawmaking could happen that would be pretty harmful. Pretty harmful. And
yeah, but you would agree with banning it for children, though, like hormone replacement. And
I agree with banning it for children, but there are some children that already have had these things and they need continued access.
And that's a tragedy. It's like the same with victims of thalidomide. I mean, it's
right. It's like if you ban it outright, then there's no path. You have to. You can say like, okay, we won't do this anymore, but you have to, like, the same surgeons that did this stuff have to be available to provide longer term health care.
And they will go to jail after they're available.
Well, it's just, it needs a little bit of nuance, and it's terrible that it does need a little bit.
Nina, you're on the internet. There is no nuance. That's what I'm learning here.
That's really unfortunate.
Sorry, I have to throw some out to my right wing audience.
A little bit of chump for the sharks.
Sex-based rights for women and an acknowledgement of the reality of sex would go a long way to solve problems.
Well, I got to get to Rose of Dawn as well, though.
But the problem is, I think, like,
yes.
Yeah, sorry, Rose.
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question, it's in order to stop like Clown World from happening. What rights could be feasibly removed that would effectively stop the slippery slope?
That's a better question that I had, and I would love for you to answer that question. My question was, what do you anticipate would be the rights that end up being taken away should more right-leaning reactionary people end up prevailing over time in, let's say, the United States, for instance, and what would be the after effect of that? But I would also love to hear after that version as well, as far as what would be like a feasible thing that people would be able to agree on, because that's kind of what we're trying to get to as well.
Yeah. So going on to like what kind of right-leaning people could potentially get rid of, and I'm not saying these as things whether I support or oppose them. These are just things that I think would feasibly happen. Would be like a banning of transition for people under the age of 18. Like that would be the main thing that I could see them bringing in. Things like toilet, kind of like bathroom laws, as they're often called. Those things are completely unfeasible in practice. So even if they were to be bought in, they would be very, very hard to enforce.
Unless there is a trans person that's harassing women, they are, because like how many men, like on the sly when there's no women around and like the male bathroom is occupied, how many men have actually gone into women's? I've never done that, but I know men that have done that. You know, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, like I think it would only like it would need for people to make it an issue, and a lot of these also from some of the kind of the setups that I've seen for these kinds of laws, it puts a lot of onus on a business to make sure that like a male isn't going into a female space or vice versa. So that would mean effectively having bouncers on bathrooms and then doing, effectively needing to ID people in order to use the bathroom. If you need to be when you put that much of an onus on the people who own the belt, like, whether it's like the people who are leasing the building or whatever, like the business owners in public.
Yeah,
like that's a big that's for the people who advocate for it. That's something with like the actual way in which these things could feasibly work is never thought of. And I think something like that would just be far too. Again, I would be very much against. So for obvious reasons, I would be very much against it. But even if you're to look at it as like a practicality argument, like it's simply not fair to put that much of an onus on a business to ensure that a trans woman never enters a female space.
You know what's funny? Have you ever heard of the case here in Canada of the gym owner? It's funny. My old man, not to dox myself, but my old man actually did his driveway. He was a gym owner. I forget his name now, but you could look up. This became a famous case where he was brought to the Human Rights Commission because a trans woman, a trans, male to female.
Yeah, that's the trans woman.
Trans woman, yes. Went into demanded what happened was women were uncomfortable. Like it wasn't like a quote unquote, passable trans woman.
Yeah.
And women were very uncomfortable with this person because she just wearing revealing clothing and stuff. So he wanted to accommodate this person by saying that, I'm going to give you a special unisex changing room.
Yeah.
It was a changing room. It wasn't like the actual working out. It was a changing room. Yeah. And this person decided to do a grift, kind of like Janet Yenev. By the way, I'm actually good friends with Annie Slats.
Right.
Did the story.
Yeah.
But this was in a town, fairly close to me. Whereas Yenev is in Vancouver. I live next to Niagara Falls. So what happened was he went to the Human Rights Commission, almost lost his business over it. And because this person wanted to be like, by you giving me a special change room on my own, it's discriminatory, blah, blah, blah. So instead of the vast majority of people being like, wow, you're going to give me my own private change room, that's amazing. It's becomes this big, culture war thing.
Yeah, because what's happening, there's two ways of how this person could be seeing it. One, which is probably most likely, is the grift angle. It's quite similar to the Yaniv case, or cases rather, with a lot of the things that Yaniv has done, because Yaniv was taking advantage of precedents that have been set by trans activists. When you declare, for example, that if you are a woman because you say you are, ergo, this is a woman's penis, this is a woman's testicles.
The feminine penis thing.
Yeah, well, that is what Yaniv was able to, yes, he failed at every single attempt, but the fact that he was even able to take it to the Human Rights Tribunal in the first place is entirely down to the basically the agendas that are pushed by trans activists. If you are to say that this is a woman's penis, like whenever I talk about this, like people always laugh, and it's like it's just so absurd. But like this is what reality is for people. Like it's for me, it's just not funny. It's like these are a woman's testicles. You say that you wax women, ergo you have to wax my testicles because they are a woman's testicles. And if you disagree and if you refuse to do so, well, you are being transphobic. And that was how Yaniv was able to kind of get this ball rolling. I mean, like, bear in mind, he's a massive grifter as it is.
Yeah,
hilariously massive grifter. Actually,
him and his mother or whatever, they're both like.
Well, it's like he's had plenty of ventures in the past, all of which kind of end up as massive failures. But it's all he's a very very lazy person, and like the whole trans thing was the easiest angle he could get. But going back on.
It's like trailer trash that like sue people for a living.
Yeah. But like going back on topic, though a lot of this stuff is down to basically agendas by activists, and it's one of the reasons why things have started to kind of go a little bit off the rails, because people don't understand. Not very people really understand what's going on. Not many people who advocate for trans rights or human rights understand what the more extreme elements of the movement are asking for. A lot of the more kind of placid trans activists don't like questioning the orthodoxy, because you'll end up with the big name queers calling them out and effectively kind of isolating them from friends and relationships. And that's a big worry that a lot of these people have. I've seen it happen in basically real time, how people will start to kind of speak out against some of the absurdity, and you just need one big bully to just wander into the conversation and instantly kind of like flash their power level, and then everyone falls in line. And it happens so often because a lot of people within queer community and queer spaces, they're regular. It's kind of going back to what Nina said earlier about it being religion. Kind of a part of the cult narrative that these people have is everyone who is outside of the queer bubble hates you. Everyone who doesn't believe what we believe is a bad person. You need, or
they want to gulag
them.
you or put you in a camp.
Like they will literally throw bricks at your head several times a day if you dare to. Like, I mean, today,
everybody who is outside of Frog Twitter hates you.
Yeah.
They want to put you into a gulag.
Yeah,
you know what's funny, Lev? Did you see today? Sorry to cut you off, Rose, but did you see today? There was this thing where the school banned parents from taking videos of this quote unquote surprise pride parade within the school that they didn't want the parents a part of. And someone, my good friend Lomez, had like, we have to stop these teachers, and underneath, guess who replies? Varge Vickners with a picture of the SS going on a gun.
See, no, but again, Gio, like you find this funny and all that with the SS references, but again, this just points to.
Varge posted.
No, I get it.
In the chat right now?
No, don't. I mean, look, Gio.
I took a screen cap because I know he's going to take it off.
Good for you. No, Gio, the point that I'm getting to here is that I think a lot of the concerns, like we were talking about here just now, with a lot of these things going on in the schools, these are absolutely important things to talk about. And I do find that people
hiding it from the parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find that there are people from your side who talk about them, and they should be talked about. But then, as far as the SS posting and all that, that kind of is something that a lot of the people, that a lot of your people find funny. They don't find them funny because it's irony posting, like they are actually true fascists and true believers in a lot of this stuff, and that goes back. No, a lot of the people in your community are literally fascists. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously. So the reason why I'm saying this is because
I myself do not identify as a fascist. By the way, I'm just saying that, like, I don't advocate for violence or putting people in camps, but I think that. There has to be some oversight when it comes to literally the future of the really society and civilization, because when it comes to educating children, the fact that these teachers are like hiding it from parents, that's kind of
Yeah, and we
That's
also have
fucking creepy.
organizations like FAIR that are talking about exactly what you're
Like,
mentioning.
I wouldn't post
but they're,
something as edgy as
but
that.
they're
I'm
not
just-
but they're not a fascist organization, FAIR. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is that
Yeah, but
other
the
people
problem
are
with FAIR,
starting.
Lev, is that they will selectively capitulate to the agenda when it suits them.
I disagree.
That's the problem.
No,
with
but
intellectual
again,
dark web people.
we're not even talking that much about FAIR or about us right now. I think what's more important to point out here is that there is this craziness that's going on in all the bubbles, whether we're talking about, like Rose and Nina, we're talking about your various communities with these church wives that want to one-up each other in virtue signaling, or what Rose is talking about right now, or the community that's that Gio is a part of. These are very important things to address, because what may be happening, and I hope it won't, would be that a lot of these tensions are going to keep rising. There's going to be more of these incidents occurring in the schools, and at a certain point, people are going to feel so cornered that they're not going to be able to express what exactly they're feeling inside about this stuff, which is partly the reason why I created BTR to begin with, so that these things could be expressed. But then, if there's no answer to that, then whatever Rose said right now about, certain things that could be done away with, what if it's not that? What if it gets all the way to whatever sick fantasies some people happen to have when it comes to creating an actual fascist dictatorship? And I know I keep going back to that, but I don't know, what are the likely chances of that, Nina and Rose, you think, that would happen because specifically of this ideological brainwashing that's going on the more left side, that would be the response?
I don't think that would ever happen. I think
I hope you're right.
I mean, that for me is, I don't know, it kind of that. Well, that's more like it goes beyond the whole kind of trans debate and just the general kind of progression of where society is at the moment. I think that it's all the way I see the future being is, if you've ever played the game Cyberpunk, I see the future as being that, where just everything is more kind of corporation focused, and corporations ultimately being more important than politicians. That's the way in which I see the future. So this idea that we could end up with, whether it's another Adolf Hitler or another Chairman Mao, I don't, at least in the West, the long term, I don't see that being a thing. I think you would have presidents or prime ministers as figureheads, but the real power is always going to be with the richest, with the corporations. I think that's much more of a kind of problem. And so long as trans issues remain trendy, the corporations will push it. With the trans, a lot of this kind of culture, even if a lot of this dies down, I still don't think it would kind of go away. I don't think in 5 years we will turn from trans women or women to bash the tranner. I don't see there being a massive kind of turn against it.
Well, I agree with you, and I want to get to Nina as well. Wait, hold on. I just want to say this. While I agree with you, the only thing that still is apparent is that there doesn't seem to be anywhere for a lot of people who are on the further right side to go. Because where are they going to go? They're not going to go to the people who are in support of various trans rights. They're not going to go to the side of the people who are in the intellectual dark web because they find them to be too cringe. So what I'm trying to figure out here is, could another outlet be built? Could an outlet be built that on one hand would be accepting of, let's say, yourself, Rose, deciding to assume the kind of identity that you assume, while at the same time not putting that in the same category as the trans story hour and whatever other ideological bullshit is going on? It seems like this is the majority of people in the world who would have common sense to adopt that kind of thing. And it would seem like a lot of people, especially a lot of young white men who are incredibly frustrated with the way things in culture are going, would be able to find that kind of more nuanced outlet. There doesn't appear to be one right now. I'm going to have to create one on my own. But before I get to Nina, any thoughts on there being this balance that could be achieved in light of all these bubbles?
Me or
Rose?
Rose?
Rose, and then Nina.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. It's so. Can you just summarize that for me again? So I'm kind of like losing a bit of concentration.
Sure, no problem.
Lev wants a
Sorry.
containment thing for
Right. Okay.
No,
so
no. Containment would imply keeping everything in the bubble. I want zero containment. I want the most hardcore fascistic people to come on the stream and to talk about whatever they talk about, but I want it to be answered
here's what
by people who are just
Slimer said
as...
in the chat, Lev.
Yes.
Does Lev really think Twitter and Paul memers are the salient fascist threat in this country? You will see blue-haired anarchitties, death squads 1,000 times over before the first Paul Tart leaves the basement!
I think Slimer is 100% right, but that's not even my main point. I agree with Rose in that I don't think a lot of these people are going to be
I'm
a
in my
threat.
basement right now, though.
Yes. No. I don't think people are going to be coming out of their basements anytime soon. But what I'm getting to, though, is something else. That anytime soon does not imply forever. What I think is very concerning to me is the fact that you do have a lot of people in their basements right now who don't have anywhere to turn to that makes sense. And the places that they end up turning to are going to be either these far left places or these far right places where they're just going to listen to whatever it is that makes sense to them. And I think that's what's driving, let's say, the verbal abuse that Rose was... There we go. That's what I'm talking about.
Here's the answer. The Terf Tranny Alliance will bring peace to the world.
Oh my God, Nina.
A third way that we can
third position.
I am being driven to the radical center. I never thought that was going to... I am a radical moderate. I hate it because I've always been like a radical on one side or another side, but I have nowhere else to go except moderate. So yeah, radical moderate. And I hope people join me in the Terf Tranny Alliance.
Oh man.
Rose, but that's just TERFs and trannies. I mean, there's still there. You could ally also, right? You could have the some other alliances that maybe we wouldn't have thought of before.
Well, wait, Nina, why do you still call them trannies though? That's kind of like a
derogatory.
Okay,
TERF is a slur. Exactly. Rose gets it. TERF is a slur. Tranny's a slur. So here we are. We've been slurred and slagged by everybody. The opposite side and our own side.
No more sister wars. No more sister wars.
And most of us have been friends right through it. And this is just dumb now. So, yeah it's a, you know, of course.
Love,
and
go
also
to
there's this thing called a sense of humor.
No, people still see it.
People really hate. But it's not my movement if it's not funny. So the loss of humor on my side, the TERF side, that has been heartbreaking. But you know what? Before I was any kind of TERF, I was, a trans, I was like a queer rainbow person. So that side broke my heart too with its extremists, and now this other side, and there's just always going to be crazy extremists, and I'm just really surprised that I'm not one of them right now.
You're in a lot of different alt cultures in the real authentic weirdo 1990s
dominatrix and things like that on the what was it, Jerry Springer.
Yeah, do you feel even like dom culture is becoming like kitchified? Like I know in England and
all right, you keep bringing up that article for the wrong reasons. The wrong reasons, Gio.
Which article?
The one where I talked about being a dominatrix. The only one. The one and single one that I ever wrote where that wasn't the point.
No, but my point is like nowadays you have like Torture Garden and all that stuff where it's become very much like...
I don't follow this stuff. I don't care about it anymore. This was in the 1990s.
No, but nowadays it's become part of like the whole like 50 Shades of Grey type stuff.
I don't care about it now. I really don't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not. I did that for like.
You don't have your finger on the pulse of BDSM culture, in other words.
No, I don't. I'm on the other side of that now.
Gio, are you trying to proposition something from Nina? What's going on?
Oh God, no.
I'm on the side of all the women who are like, holy shit, what did I do in the 90s? Like, holy shit, that fucked me up. So yes, that's the side that I'm on now. This fucks people up side.
But it seems like in the 1990s, maybe it's just my terminal like millennial nostalgia brain, but it seems that there was sort of like an authentic underground to a lot of it, like Riot Girl and the bondage stuff. But like nowadays, all of that's like so out in the open that it's like the fucking OnlyFans thing is like, that's
all right. I will say this in the night, as I said in this article that you read, supposedly in the 90s in San Francisco, people were very adamant that this was for consenting adults only. And it really turned into another thing. I just cannot believe the way people are pushing this stuff on kids right now. It's appalling.
Yeah. And that's why I think people who are among Nina's side and Gia's side and Rose's side could definitely agree on these things and just agree not to disrespect each other in the meantime, and I think it'll be all right. So anyway, we got to go to Super Chats right now. Thank you guys so much for...
I think Rose had another point.
Oh, yes, Rose, go for it.
Wait, what? I didn't have anything else.
Oh, sorry. I thought you
before we go, I want to say, Rose, it's been great talking with you. I wish I could see you as well. I would have loved to have gone on camera, but I've been up since like 5 and it's like past 7 here. I've been up since like just before 5 in the morning, having to drive all the way into London and back for like work. I got here late because I was getting back from work. But anyway, you said something that is something I've said a lot, which is, yes, everybody has the right to identify however they want. They don't have the right to force other people to identify them the same way.
And that's one of the biggest problems with the current trans movement. It's like, if they want to say that I am a woman because I say I am, that's fine, whatever. But it's when it's like, no, you have to accept me as a woman. That's where the issue with this lies. And too many trans activists just kind of bury this and try and, they just try and enforce it on people. It makes absolutely no sense. It's not going to stick.
Well, with the enforcing, you were saying
thing, it's interesting. I think like as a detached observer, I think a lot of stuff in the art world is interesting. The stuff that who am I thinking of in particular? Not Marilyn Minter, like Cindy Sherman, Nan Golden, that type of stuff is very interesting to me. But when it comes, like you were saying, to the brass tacks of like actually normalizing some aspects of it, it's kind of like, yeah. Like notice, Lev, notice how I'm up on the literature here. I'm not like your average Paul Cell transphobe.
I never said you were. That's not the issue at all. In fact,
I'm a more sophisticated transphobe. Lev.
But here's the problem, Gio. You can't just say that, I know a lot of this stuff, so there's no problem with this Mr. Hyde that's hiding beneath the Dr. Jekyll. Mr. Sam Hyde, exactly. Because that's the real issue here, because you have a lot of very smart and curious and interesting people who are within more of like this, this more aggressive, edgy right-wing culture. But I feel like a lot of them, they don't have any other outlet, number one. And number two, there is so much peer pressure, just like it is with the trans people, just like it is with the TERFs. There is so much fucking peer pressure to agree with whatever it is that the group considers to be correct. And that's what I always want to fight against. And I feel like that is the big mission of BTR.
Like the problem, Lev, is that you're viewing things from a position of hyper-individualism, whereas we're saying that when a society adopts a certain level of a fluidity of the subject itself, that is when you get all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And
yes, you could say that philosophically, but it's all about brass tacks. It's all about, okay, good, you said that. How do you get out of that situation? What do you do? And the what do you do question has the shittiest responses by people on the far right. I'm sorry, but that's...
How is that shitty, Lev? How is it shitty to ban a drag time story hour? How is that...
The liberals agree with you there, Gio. That's not the issue, and you know it. That's putting in a straw man here. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The authoritarian nature of yada, 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 yada. You know what I'm talking about.
As much as you hate critical theory, as much as you hate Adorno, you both have the same conclusion that the camps are just around the corner if we do certain... There's no poetry after the you-know-what, Lev. I'm sorry, but you should read The Dialectic of Enlightenment. You would agree 100% with Horkheimer and Adorno, Lev.
Gio, the problem is that you can read as many books as you want, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be wiser, and that goes for anybody. It's not about the amount of books that you read. It's not about the amount of things that you know. It's more about whether or not what you know actually makes sense in the real world.
Paranoia, Lev.
It's not a matter of paranoia. First of all, I don't even think it's going to happen, like I said before.
No,
but number
of course
two,
not. We're entirely too ineffective for that.
Yes, too ineffective, absolutely. But it's not even about that.
So why do you care, Lev?
I'll tell you because I care about. I'll tell you why I care. Because I care about the community that I saw growing up, going to 4chan, the frustrations of the people that are on that site. I genuinely care, even though a lot of people who are from that community think that I'm just like some liberal centrist who doesn't understand. If I didn't care, I wouldn't make this stream in the first place. I wouldn't align myself together, in terms of having people on the stream that I completely disagree with politically.
Who has institutional power and who doesn't?
You have institutional power in your own circle, but again, you're... Anyway, we're not going to get into it right now. We're not. We have two guests here. We have to respect.
Oreos.
We have to respect the two guests. Gio, no, seriously, we have to. We have two guests over here. This is not about us right now. So anyway, let us get to super chats, and I really appreciate everybody being here once again against peer pressure and for the free expression like we do here on BTR. Let us get to the super chats. Here we go. So we have, by the way, there was a new patron. I'm not going to say their name just because it sounds like a real person, but that is $23 patron. So that's great. And we have over here, okay, okay. The ABC 123, $5. The GeoCell state is, what is this? UNDFTD. What does that mean? I don't know, in capital letters.
UND? What?
Yeah, UNDFTD. It's an anagram. I don't know what exactly that is. Anyway, I'm going to move on once you figure that out. Undefeated. There we go. Yeah. Another one from ABC. This anime slander can be put to bed by the back of bald Omni-Man who bears the Joestar and the Berserk brand mark, post-physique, or BTFO. There we go. So next we have... Massive McGee, 2 pounds. State-mandated GF, in parentheses, buxom QT forest witch. Discuss. And lastly, we have Croin Kicks, $2 with just a simple sneed.
The busty forest witch GF is the one I didn't burn. Oh, sorry.
There we go.
We're the great-granddaughters of witches. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, this is the stream. Thank you guys so much. Any plugs over here? So, Nina, where can people find you and your beautiful project?
Oh, we didn't even talk about apocalypseanimated.com.
That's right. Well, let's talk about it right now.
No, we'll talk about it another time.
Yes.
Go to Apocalypse Animated, because there's a lot to say. What I'd like to do is talk about Apocalypse Animated with somebody that is into the apocalypse and the symbols therein, because it was a trip. But yes, I illustrated the Book of Revelation with almost 300 animated GIFs. You can see them at apocalypseanimated.com. Working on lenticulars. This is not the best example, but this is at least what a lenticular is. We'll have those soon. And you can find me on Twitter if you just look for Nina Paley, and you can find me at my blog, ninapaley.com. And you can just Google me and find my other films and long history and stuff like that. And the podcast I do, Heterodorks, which you can find at heterodorks.com and also on a few podcast carriers.
Who do you do the podcast with?
I do that podcast with Corinna Cohn, who is a wonderful human being and also a transsexual. Perfect. Or feminized eunuch if you want to be materialist.
Feminized.
And on the Heterodorks website is where the Terf Tranny Alliance resides, and we have pins for which we make no profit, but it was a fun art project.
Nice. And follow that on anchor.fm. Real quick, anchor.fm/heterodorks, DORX.
Yes.
And what we're saying, Kron Kicks the super chat.
Yes, Kron Kicks for $2. Thank you. I identify as Sneed. So,
Oh, and Tux loves you, creator of the Gunta 64, sent in $2 and says Sneed. Sneed back to
There
you,
we
Tux.
go.
Thank you so much for watching. I also hope people have been filling out the BTR bingo. And lastly, I want to say that right now, Mother Superior is still queen of the Super Chat. So for those who don't know, you guys don't see it on the screen, but the people who are watching the stream see it. There is a ticker on the bottom where there is either a king or queen of the Super Chat, depending on gender or whatever, who send in the Super Chat. And so far, Mother Superior is ahead with $50. So if you want to become king or queen of the Super Chat, usurp the throne, if you will, you got to send in more than $50, and we will really, really, really appreciate it. And Rose of Dawn, where can people find you?
So at the moment, I'm pretty active on Twitter. So just search for Rose_of_Dawn. I also have a YouTube channel, which I haven't been updating a lot as of recently. Just a lot going on in my personal life, which makes it quite difficult to keep tabs sometimes. But yeah, I try and post stuff on there, so that's another place you can check me out.
Yeah, you do a
Excellent.
great YouTube series. I mean, you're doing the podcast, but you've been featured on. Was the BBC you were interviewed on? Or?
I've been on the BBC. I've also been on ITV. I know that
ITV.
I know that GB News has been trying to get me on as well.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I do occasionally appear in the mainstream media.
And you have
but
a
not
great
loads.
series. Yeah, you have a great series too of pillars of the community.
Yeah, I need to get finished. I need to get my next one of those finished. I really enjoy doing Pillars of the Community because it's just a deep dive into very interesting people and just kind of what they symbolize.
You know what you would like in your neck of the woods? Have you ever heard of Alexander Gordon Johans?
Yes, the name rings a bell.
Yeah, I think maybe if you did a video on him, because I think he identifies as trans now, but he is like I think one of those more like obscure British lolcows within like the far left that there's a Godwinson documentary on him, but like that was sort of just a ridicule of Johans. It wasn't like it was comprehensive, but it was more just like to like let's make fun of the lolcow because like I think what you do like you don't necessarily go into it with the intent. Like, I mean, of course you make fun of lolcows, obviously, but like some of the stuff you cover is like quite harrowing and quite like, for example, you did one of the better, I think, Chris Chan videos.
Thank you. Yeah, the Chris Chan video was like the reason why I started doing Pillars of the Community in the first place is because it was inspired by Gino Samuel's Chris Chan documentary series, and this wanted to do a similar thing to that. And then I eventually just thought, well, I could actually do a video on Chris Chan. Yeah. And like it was a very fun video to put together. Like purposely choosing like Pokemon and Sonic music to play in the background and like just kind of splicing together like all like the classic Saga clips. That bit was fun. When it got to him making the unclit, that was a little bit grim, as one could expect. Yes. But yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. I have been working on several ideas for other Pillars of the Community videos. One I actually paid for some voice work to be done on it. So that's fun.
We had a video, we had a live stream with my good friend Saturnalia Sundown, who is an expert on various occultic knowledges. And we had, I think Turkey Tom was on that one as well. A good friend of the show. You would love it. We talk about Chris Chan in relation to a lot of different, like theories about Hollywood and Laurel Canyon. Yeah. And a lot of very interesting connections to this
Encyclopedia Dramatica.
Yes. And this
I love
janky girl. Yeah,
I love talking about Chris Chan. Like he's like he's a bit of he's one of these kind of like guilty pleasure things, and like I know now we feels like we're also almost in like.
Well, Nina, do you know who Chris Chan is? I want to make.
I know who Chris Chan is. Yes.
When did your Chris Chan cherry pop, so to speak? When did this happen?
Well, you mean when did I learn who Chris Chan was?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I don't know, a couple years ago, I guess.
Oh man, I thought we were the ones to. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you told me more. Like, it's not like knowing about Chris Chan means that I know everything about Chris Chan. You certainly told me more.
It's a bottomless pit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was cherry popping, but it was certainly intrusive. It was sort of like a kind of secondary assault.
I'll always take pride. I'll always take pride in that I was the one who introduced Blair White to Chris Chan.
Oh my god!
Wow,
amazing.
Yeah, like because she had absolutely no idea, and it's just you could just tell like the complete horror in her voice.
Same happened with the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe that I brought on to break the rules, I think back in 20, and he was just absolutely horrified. He did not want to know anymore about what was going on, and that was even before the mother incident. I mean, Nina, you know about the whole mother incident, right, with Chris Chan and his mother?
You probably told me, but maybe I try to block this stuff out.
Well, okay, Rose, how would you describe it? What exactly happened there? And we'll end this soon, but just for the sake of Nina, just to help Nina out.
To help Nina out, thank you.
So, like, which thing? Sorry, because I'm losing.
Well, what exactly transpired with Chris and his mother?
With his mother.
Oh,
okay.
wait, Nina doesn't know this.
There's. Okay, so in. Do you want the short story or the long story?
Long story.
Make it YouTube friendly, please.
Make it last.
Okay, so Chris and Bob have always had a bit of a weird relationship with one another. Chris has been particularly clingy to Bob, and Bob has been very, very clingy to Chris. They've regularly been caught in public, holding hands, having their arms around each other, having a very surreal relationship. And this took a bit of a dark turn around June to July last year when Chris started telling people that he had a new gal pal. Well, he had a new heart suite in Chris language, and this actually turned out to be his mother. And so what happened? What came out was that he had purchased a book on how to have sex with disabled people, and he actually had sex with his mother. It's as to what Bob's mental state is, it's unclear. People think that she has like Alzheimer's.
Dementia.
It's never been confirmed.
Well, Nina, you see the picture of her, right?
The thing is, Bob kind of puts on her like kind of layers it on a bit when they've done videos in the past where they're trying to flog like a blanket or some of the tats from the Horde. Bob will kind of layer on a little bit about her mental state. So it's very, very difficult to understand what her actual position is. But she's certainly a lot smaller, frailer, and weaker than like a 40-year-old man-child who believes that he is Jesus Christ and a goddess from another dimension.
I wouldn't even.
And the father of the electric hedgehog Pokemon Sonichu. And Rose, you've always got to mention Sonichu and Rosechu.
And
so anyway,
guided by the one magi woman. What does she call it? Magichan. Magichan is like
Magichan.
Well, Chris Chan is Magichan.
He's married to Magichan.
Yeah, but Magichan is like Chris's avatar light body stuff. Yeah.
No. That's like Magi-chan is one of the Sonnet is the psychic Sonichu.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Not. Oh, yeah. So that's not part
he's
of
the psychic
Chris.
Sonichu. So
he said that Magichan was the female version of Christ or something like that.
Yeah, Nina, for reference, this is Magichan.
I always think of the wrestling move, the Magic Killer.
It's not showing up yet. There we go. Oh, that's okay. Great. Yeah.
Yes, that's Magi-chan. Part of the chaotic combo.
Yeah.
So long story short, Chris was arrested back in August of last year, which even Ralph caught on camera because
of all
it's
fucking
just
people.
really, which I just find absolutely
while wearing
hilarious.
the Chris Chan outfit.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And Chris,
You're
has been-
famous, Chris. I could imagine him. He was with his fucking wife, who apparently had a kid recently. You're famous. What do you say, Chris? You're famous now. That's right.
The merge is real. The merge is it's happening. So Chris was in county jail awaiting trial, which has been deferred on several occasions.
Yeah, it keeps
but at the end of February, he was taken away to an undisclosed location, which is likely to be, which a lot of people think is probably a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. Like whilst he was in jail, he was sending out letters to people, and occasionally there would be a phone call leaked, but nobody's heard from him in the last month. And these kinds of, like, I know that the kind of psychiatric system in America can be pretty fucked up. People can actually go. People can go missing in those systems completely. And it's when I realized that was a thing which can actually happen in America. That's really scary.
Yeah, Thomas Saz was completely right about the institutionalization of certain people, but the letters themselves are crazy too.
Talking about being Jesus and
I mean, like it's difficult to say how much of it is Chris just playing, like basically just having a game, and how much is like a genuine belief with him. I mean, the thing is, he's not like he's autistic, but he's not real. He's not like he's really kind of mentally challenged, if that makes sense.
He has other mental
he's just
problems,
lazy.
but he's not. Yeah.
Do you think like he'll pull a Jack Nicholson in One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and like assume a certain kind of demeanor, so that way he'll get transferred to a psychiatric institution instead of being in jail? I don't know.
Well, I would assume that his lawyer would be advising him against that.
The real issue is he going to be housed with women because he identifies as a woman?
No, he isn't.
Yay!
Initially he was. I think that, like, initially there was word that he was being put in with women, but in Virginia, you have to have had gender reassignment surgery before you could be like housed in a female center, which he hasn't had.
Because Chris Chan, like, the thing is, I remember we did those streams, we did a few of them, and people criticized me, but I think, like, you have to realize that CWC has like a very long history of abusing women, or at least being a creep around women. Yeah. And that wouldn't be in an institutional setting with women in a psychiatric ward who don't probably have a lot of control over their own senses. That's a formula for disaster.
Yes.
But at the same time, I know Chris said that Chris liked it in jail, that they treated him somewhat, YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Treated Chris fairly well. Of course, the food always sucks, but like, I don't. People have this fantasy that Chris Chan's going to go to like an Oz, like Oswald Penitentiary. For those who don't know, the show Oz was like the first HBO show. He's gonna go to Oz. He's gonna go to the showers, and it's gonna be like green light KOS. It's not gonna happen. I think that Chris will end up in a psychiatric institution. I mean, probably will never be able to see Barb again for the, thank God. But
So I wanted to mention, like, Rose talked about how you cannot enforce sex segregation in bathrooms strictly, but you totally can enforce prison segregation. Like, you can totally enforce, sex segregated institutions. And
I personally think that there should be no female guards in male prisons, and there should be no male guards in female prisons, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that should completely be.
It's pretty often it happens. I think that the female guards sleep with some of the prisoners.
They call it prison beautiful. Yeah, like the thing is, like, what happens is there will be lifers that are very good at manipulating people, and they will manipulate female guards. Like, God forbid that a female guard in a riot situation is like, I don't want to say it for YouTube, but what happens is they form a relationship with female guards, because not to stereotype, but female guards, they tend not to be that attractive. But to prisoners in like a male prison,
they're not going to complain.
Yeah, they're not going to complain, and they end up manipulating. There has been female guards who have helped male prisoners, murderers, escape prison But another problem is that the other side is with male guards in female prisons.
Yeah.
There have been direct cases of RP. I don't want to say it for YouTube.
Yes, thank you.
And abuse by male guards in female, because like some of those female prisoners are kind of attractive, and it's like if you have absolute power over them, I think there has to be total sex segregation. There should only be women in female prisons, and there should only be male guards in male prisons.
Well,
yeah,
soon there's
no
gonna be
argument
robots.
there.
Yeah.
Soon there's going to be robots. But anyway, guys, we are finished with the stream. I really love the conversations that
Yeah,
we
it's
had.
been great. I apologize again for arriving late.
No worries at all.
problem,
And
The
for
only
being
thing,
a bit
the,
sleepy.
no worries. The only thing that I want to ask Rose and the people who are watching this is, if you value the kind of conversations that take place on this platform, subscribe, share this with everybody you know, bring people onto BTR, because BTR, like I said before, the idea behind is bringing together people who otherwise would never have a chance to talk, and the opposite of having some kind of a containment, or however was phrased before, as far as more of these right-wing ideas. The idea is exactly to bring on liberal people and right-wing people, and to have them share the ideas and see what one side is missing from the other side, and come to some common sense ideas of what exactly we're in right now. Because otherwise, it's not going to be pretty, and that's why BTR exists. And again, please share this out. Add a like. The likes definitely help with the algorithm, 100%. So add a like, click the bell, keep subscribing, and all that good stuff. And once again, Rose, Nina, Gio, I highly appreciate you guys being here, doing what it is that you do. And patreon.com/breaktherules. You're going to get prints. You're going to get a lot of wonderful things there. Patreon-only streams, and that's pretty much it.
But you have to do one soon, so
Yes.
God
Good
bless.
night, everybody.